Thank you all. We have people from every single state joining us, so thank you all for your participation and being part of the center's community. We do want your participation as we move along today, so in addition to having Q&A and discussion here in person for those of us who are filling this room, you folks online can chat through the interface where you're watching us. There will be closed captions. Right below closed captions, there's a little chat window. I'll be monitoring the chat as it goes throughout the day, answering as I can, and hopefully passing questions on to our presenters. I've also been asked to say that we have door prizes. Woo! So at some point during the day, we will be pulling names of registrants, including our virtual attendees, and we'll contact those who win a delightful copy of the Medicare Handbook. And that's no small prize. Some people here know that. So thank you all, and I'll now hand things over to our esteemed board president, Judy Fetter.
Thank you. Well, aren't you a pretty sight? It's, I love this meeting. It is always so uplifting, and it's so lovely to see everybody, to see us all together, to be back in the pre-COVID location, KFF, Barbara Jordan Conference Center. So welcome, everybody. It's really a delight to be here. What I feel strongly about in terms of this meeting is it's so terrific to be with people who are so committed, not just to an effective Medicare program, but also to effective government that actually works for people. It is odd to me, thinking about the theme of today's event, it's a little odd to think that our commitment to Medicare and achieving the goals we have for it requires a pathway to change. I mean, when you think about Medicare, it is often treated by the broad community as an icon in social policy, along with Social Security, social insurance that collectively protects people against risks, that represents what is the best in government. And you even think of that as in the Medicare for All movement, that kind of presumes that Medicare is the gold standard. And it certainly should be and can be and sometimes is. But being the best we've got is not good enough. It needs to be the best, which is why it is so important that we gather together to think about advancing it and as well as securing it. I think that the people in this room know that, valuable as it is in this room, and excuse me, on camera or wherever you are out there, that Medicare is in many ways sorely challenged. What was once a relatively simple program has become extremely complicated for beneficiaries. What was once fully a public program is now half private. What was always partial and insufficient coverage is now leaving beneficiaries with very high costs relative to income. And what was assumed to be secure social insurance is, I would say, now at significant threat of moving into a less efficient, less protective, less accountable private sector operation. And it's because of all these concerns and the need to address them that I would say that we're all here to share various concerns, strategies, and pathways to building Medicare to be, as I said, not just the best we've got, but a program that serves its beneficiaries efficiently, effectively, in getting them access to the quality care that they deserve. To guide us through our day, or really to kick it off, it is my pleasure to turn the podium over to the Center for Medicare Advocacy's fearless leader, Judy Stein. As many of you may know, Judy and the Center for Medicare Advocacy are on our own pathway to change, with Judy soon to be taking on a different role and new leadership in David and Scott. David's looking shocked right here. We forgot to tell you.
That's what it said.
I knew that. It's showing our common experience and why he's going to be such a great leader. I want to put you all on alert that we are going to be celebrating Judy and all her achievements properly at some time in the future. And believe me, you'll all know and hopefully be with us for that celebration. But right now, we're going to get down to business. And as usual, Judy, we will follow your lead for the rest of the day.
Excellent. Following two Judy's leads is not easy, and I want to thank all my incredible staff and board members for being on board with us and for doing so. And Judy Fader is just a stellar partner in the efforts that we have to make healthcare accessible. Didn't happen there. Okay. Welcome to the Center's 11th Annual National Voices of Medicare Summit. It is a pleasure to be back home. Thank you, Tricia and KFS, for sharing this gorgeous place with us all. This is a spot that has nurtured many of us in debating and thinking about and discussing how we can get better health care to more people for an affordable rate throughout the country, and also touch on so many other social justice issues. And those of you who don't know, I always must say, I encourage you to learn about Barbara Jordan, what she did and what she should help lead the way for the rest of us, and for the insight that KFF had to name this beautiful space for her. Tricia Newman has been the lead in getting us objective data upon which we can build advocacy, and partnering with us, with her crew here at KFF for so many years. And we're indebted to her for her friendship and for her wisdom. I also want to thank Arnold Ventures for the fact that today we are not charging anyone to be present with us at this very inclusive meeting. We have, I believe, over 1,000 people from all 50 states, either in the room or online. Hello, people. And that is because of the largesse, in large part, of the Arnold Ventures funding that has allowed us to be all we can to as many people as possible here at the summit today. We also want to note that we are shining a light on caregiving and people who need care. And I also want to always remind people that that is a circle. Who needs care today will need to give care tomorrow, or maybe it's earlier today and later today those roles change. But we know the White House has been highlighting caregiving this month, and we want to join in that initiative as we have our conversations today and as we speak to people who are focusing their careers. Shout out to SEIU on getting rights and responsibilities proper for people who give care. Shout out to those who need and are advocating for care around the country. Today, the partnerships we create, along with the existing partnerships we strengthen, will make a difference in the lives of Medicare beneficiaries and their families. We will build powerful new relationships and keep the ones we've got, and hopefully continue to network on behalf of people who need our work together throughout the year. So many people have said how valuable it is to be together. And now when you get that email, I can say, oh, that's Athena, or oh, I've known Jessica forever, you know, but we need to build on that strength. Networking has been lost because of COVID, and it's time to build on it for those who can get together. The discussions and discoveries we make will ripple across the center's mission, which is to advance access to comprehensive Medicare coverage, health quality, and quality health care for older people and people with disabilities, and to ensure that we think about equity at all times. Here at the Summit, let's foster community, compassion, and change for the better for tomorrow for all Medicare beneficiaries and all families. So let's get to work. And to start the day, I introduce again Vice President for Medicare, Tricia Newman from KFF, and Associate Director and soon-to-be co-director of the Center for Medicare Advocacy, Attorney David Lipschitz, to frame the day.
Thank you, Judy and Judy. I want to begin by thanking our program sponsors and our friends at Justice and Aging, Legal Action Center, Medicare Rights Center, National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, and the Rothkopf Law Group. We will be thanking our various sponsors throughout the day. Now, I would like to introduce a longtime friend of the center, Tricia Newman, who needs no introduction, but just got one. Her bio is in the program, so I will spare you the details, but she is a nationally recognized expert, go-to Medicare source. The information coming out of the Kaiser Family Foundation is top-notch and sets the standard for Medicare, Medicaid, Affordable Care Act, and other health policy research. Having said that, I just learned that the Dogs of KFF Twitter site rivals the research.
It doesn't rival anything that the policy staff does. The Dogs of KFF is, I think, the most popular Twitter feed that comes out of KFF.
Okay. There you have it. There you have it. It should be the other way around.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So our plan, we are very fortunate to have Tricia here with us again to help us set the stage for the day, to talk about Medicare facts and figures so that we can proceed with the same set of facts and understand the program a little better as we talk about various nuances and efforts to change Medicare work. We do have a few slides that will help us along in this discussion that, if I remember, I will try to turn to as we go along. And just a quick disclaimer. The words that come out of this mouth are not to be attributed to Tricia. Tricia is a respected policy researcher, and I am not. So I can.
But David has a great sense of humor.
Thank you.
And I don't know if I do or not.
Well, I think you do.
Okay, thank you.
I have laughed at your jokes before. Thank you. So it's our intent over the next few minutes, 25, half an hour or so, to touch on some of the basics of Medicare. Talk about Medicare beneficiaries, talk about Medicare financing, the growth in Medicare Advantage, the difference between Medicare Advantage and traditional Medicare, what draws people to Medicare Advantage, what some of the pitfalls are, and then if time permits, a few other topics. So let's start with the most important issue, Medicare beneficiaries, the people. Tell us about Medicare beneficiaries. What sets them apart from the rest of the population?
Okay, but before I do,
yes,
I just want to say how nice it is to see everybody here. It's really great to have everyone in this room. There's so many friends and colleagues and people who share a commitment and an interest, and it's so nice for us all to be back together. So I just want to acknowledge that before we go into numbers, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
I don't feel the same, but that's fine.
I feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I describe the Medicare population, because I know many of you in this room work so closely with people on Medicare. But the point of this slide is to make the point that while many people on Medicare, particularly the ones you see in TV ads, are healthy and wealthy, many people on Medicare are not, and that's why we need you to do the work that you do. Here you can see that half of all people live on an income of $36,000 or less per person. I'm not going to get too nosy, but I would imagine very few people in this room live on an income at that level and have all the expenses that people have. Savings of less than about $100,000 per person. You know, does that sound like a lot? Well, maybe not if you think about expenses that are not covered by Medicare, particularly long-term services and supports. And while many people are healthy, others are not, so a quarter have a functional impairment, and that's been associated, which Judy's done a ton of work on this, with lots of medical expenses. 20% are also covered by Medicaid, so these are the so-called dual eligibles, and I kind of hate that term because it's so unpeople-ish, but these are low-income people. A disproportionate share of the under 65 disabled population on Medicare is also on Medicaid. You know, the point is there are people with different challenges. The one I like to point out a lot is nearly 1 in 5 have a cognitive impairment. Earlier, Judy said that this program has become so complicated. When I think about how complicated it's become and the whole notion that we're relying on people to make decisions not only about their health care, which is extremely difficult, but also about their coverage, which has become more difficult, it seems a high bar given the level of cognitive impairment in this population. And from a lot of the work that we did in the past, we've learned that older people without cognitive impairments actually don't like to ask their children for help, their adult children for help. There's a desire to be independent. So we have a lot of people in this program who want to function independently and have difficulties doing so, and the program truthfully is not making it easier for people because it has gotten so complicated.
So you touched on the income levels, amount of savings that Medicare beneficiaries tend to have. Can you talk a little bit about their expenses, what they have to pay for in the Medicare program compared to non-Medicare households?
Right, so people in Medicare have out-of-pocket spending for lots of things. If they're in traditional Medicare and they don't have supplemental insurance, there's the Part A deductible that's more than $1,600. There's a Part B deductible. They have a Part D plan. There's a Part D deductible. There's co-insurance. And if they feel they need supplemental coverage, as many do, there's generally a premium for supplemental coverage, and that can be a couple $100s per month. Even people in Medicare Advantage plan, I feel like this is a carefully guarded secret, but even people in Medicare Advantage plans have significant out-of-pocket spending because they too have cost sharing, but they do not tend to have supplemental coverage unless they have low incomes and then they qualify for Medicaid. Nancy is one of my colleagues who is here, has done work that's looked at out-of-pocket spending as a share of household budgets, and people on Medicare pay a larger share of their family budgets on their spending on health care than non-Medicare households. And while I'm doing a shout out, Alex has done the work on income and assets that you see in this chart. So anything I say that sounds like it's smart comes from having a really great team of people who do the work.
Thank you. So is it true that KFF research has found that not only Medicare households pay more in overall dollar amount for their health care than others, but it's of a smaller pool of money that they have to spend?
They have less income declines with age. Spending continues with age. So even though we're growing older, we still have rents, mortgages, groceries, transportation costs.
Haircuts.
Not for you, maybe for me. Haircuts for me. So the burden of health care is great for older people, particularly those with modest incomes. And as we can see, many people do have modest incomes. And only the very poor qualify for Medicaid.
Okay, so that helps set the stage for Medicare beneficiaries and the financial challenges that they face. Let's talk a little bit about Medicare's program finances. Medicare financing is a common topic in DC, often using somewhat inflammatory language about how Medicare is going bankrupt. Can you talk a little bit about Medicare financing and some of the pressures on it?
So Medicare is financed by payroll taxes that we all pay, that 1.45% that comes from our paycheck and our employers pay. It also comes from general revenues, taxpayer dollars that contribute, and premiums. Those are the main sources. You will hear that Medicare is going bankrupt. That has been part of the the language that describes Medicare forever. But actually, Medicare cannot go bankrupt. When people talk about that, they are talking about Part A, the Hospital Insurance Trust Fund. And while it is true that the actuaries are projecting that the trust fund will be insolvent in 2031, what that means is there's not enough income coming in during that year to cover all the expenses for that year. So at some point during that year, difficult decisions would need to be made about what to do when there's insufficient money in the trust fund to pay providers, for example. You hear that sometimes expressed in terms of, well, they'll have to cut benefits. That's a policy decision. Maybe it's a decision they will make. I personally, I've been working on Medicare for a long time, as some of you have, and to me it is inconceivable that policymakers will let Medicare become financially insolvent. It is a popular program, but it does become a part of a big part. It becomes a large part of budget discussions because Medicare is a large part of the federal budget. And so when and if Congress starts to worry about the deficit and debt, which it used to do more often than it has recently, Medicare will be a large part of that discussion.
So one thing that is largely missing from that discussion, as you well know, is the impact that the Medicare Advantage program has on Medicare's finances. We're going to get a lot more into Medicare Advantage, but can you talk a little bit about Medicare Advantage and how it's paid now relative to what traditional Medicare spends on a given beneficiary?
Sure. So Medicare Advantage, just so everybody in the room is kind of at the same place, these are private plans offered by large insurance companies mostly, like United Health and Humana. Medicare pays them a set amount of money per enrollee. And the system was never actually designed to save money. I guess back originally, Medicare paid 95% of traditional Medicare costs for people in Medicare Advantage plans, which back then were called just HMOs. The program then got, pardon?
Medicare Plus Choice.
Then, years later, it was relabeled Medicare Plus Choice, and now it's called Medicare Advantage. So these private plans have done a lot of rebranding within the context of the Medicare program. But I think the point that David is getting at is the current payment system has the effect of paying more per person in a Medicare Advantage plan than it pays for similar people in traditional Medicare. And MedPAC, which is an independent advisory commission that looks at Medicare payment systems and gets into all the nitty-gritty, important, weedy methodological issues, came out this year and said, well, actually, Medicare is paying 20% more per person than it is, more than 20%, than it's paying for similar people in the traditional Medicare program, to the tune of more than $80 billion. So this issue of payment is a real serious one. Maybe if there was concern about the trust fund, people would connect the dots, because some of the money for Medicare Advantage plans is drawn from the Medicare Part A trust fund. Some of the money comes from the Part B trust fund, but that affects premiums. So the fact that there are these so-called overpayments means money, it's adding pressure, financial pressure to the trust fund, and it is also increasing premiums that are not just paid by people in Medicare Advantage plans, but also people in traditional Medicare.
So everyone's Part B premium is higher because of the heightened payments to Medicare Advantage.
Exactly.
Right, thank you. So let's talk about, and I just remembered we have slides, let's talk about the growth in Medicare Advantage enrollment, which presumably adds further stress to Medicare finances because Medicare Advantage plans are being paid more than what traditional Medicare would spend on a given beneficiary.
So this surprise, every time I look at the slide, it surprises me because it's still somewhat shocking to me that more than half of all eligible people on Medicare are in a private plan. For those of you who went through the Medicare for All push a few years ago, I don't think anybody who was pushing hard for Medicare for All thought that they were pushing for Medicare Advantage for all. But the truth is that this is what Medicare Advantage, this is what Medicare looks like today. And 4 years from now, 60% of all people on Medicare will be in a Medicare Advantage plan unless Congress or the administration makes fundamental policy changes. So their program is increasingly being privatized, and this will come at a cost to taxpayers, premium payers, which is now the 66 million people on Medicare, actually states that pay premiums on behalf of dually eligible people, and the trust fund.
Right. So I want to put a pin in that note about the Medicare for All advocates and looking at the current Medicare program and realizing that perhaps Medicare Advantage for All wasn't exactly what they had in mind. We're going to get to that later on in the day. But maybe we could touch on now, we see this rapid growth in Medicare Advantage. We know it's costing the program more as more people enroll in Medicare Advantage. Why? Why are people so drawn to Medicare Advantage?
Okay, so we put out this piece because we kept doing this slide and it kept taking different forms and we kept adding different things. So, and we've done a lot of focus groups where we talk to people to try to figure out why they're drawn to Medicare Advantage. The extra benefits are a huge draw. We talk to a lot of people who are middle income, and they're like, look, I don't know if I can afford a Medigap policy, and they're offering me extra benefits, a debit card, dental, vision, hearing. Why not? No or low supplemental premiums. Medicare Advantage plans, because of the payments that we just talked about, are not only required to use their extra dollars to provide extra benefits, but also they're motivated to do so because they know it attracts people. So in this case, they're providing all these benefits for no premium. So most people in Medicare who are in a Medicare Advantage plan are getting that coverage without paying a premium other than the Part B premium. That's in contrast to people in traditional Medicare who may pay for a Medigap policy, which could be a couple $100s a month, or their retiree health benefits, which could be a couple $100s a month. So that's number 2. 3, this is one I'm worried about, rising Part D premiums. Part D premiums used to be really low for standalone policies. They are going up, and we think they could go up even more next year. We don't know the effect of weight loss drugs, for example, which could affect Part D premiums. The out-of-pocket cap, the changes in the benefit design could also affect the premium. And if Medicare Advantage plans are able to use their rebate dollars to keep their premiums low or down to zero, standalone Part D plans can't do that. And so you could see premiums rising for people in traditional Medicare who need to buy a standalone drug plan, but not for people in Medicare Advantage. So that's number 3. 4, Medicare Advantage plans have an out-of-pocket limit. To me, it's unbelievable that traditional Medicare does not. So for people who are financially concerned about their liability, it is scary to be in traditional Medicare without a supplement. 5, it's simple. It's one-stop shopping. You don't need a Medigap policy or a Part D plan. You just get it all in one. 6, aggressive marketing. We've looked at marketing, and brokers are out there, TV ads. They're marketing like crazy. You don't see traditional Medicare ads. You don't see that kind of marketing. Broker commissions have incentivized brokers to sell Medicare Advantage over other products. Employers, we're just doing this work looking at employers. We've done work in the past that have shifted their retirees onto Medicare Advantage plans. Most of the retirees in these plans do not have a choice. So in essence, if they want to be in traditional Medicare, they need to give up their employer-sponsored retiree benefits. So that's why you may have seen some reports coming out of New York and other places from retirees who are not so happy about this shift. We're now looking at states that are doing this, and Alex is working on this. We're looking at how many states are moving their retirees into Medicare Advantage. Spoiler alert, 13 states have moved their retirees into Medicare Advantage with no choice of other plans, and a lot more give an option. Number 9, another issue that I've focused a lot on lately, and actually my former colleague Christina Bacuti did as well, which is no guarantee issue protections for people with Medigap, unless you're in 4 states. So this means if you're unhappy with your Medicare Advantage plan, you want to go back to traditional Medicare. If you have a pre-X, you may not be able to buy a policy, or if you do, you could be charged more or be denied coverage for anything related to your pre-X. When I talk to young reporters who were kind of got into the business after the ACA, they are shocked that there's a market that still denies coverage to people based on a pre-existing condition. There's some interest in Congress in doing something about it. I'm not sure there's a ton of momentum. And then finally, I would say beneficiaries are not well informed about the trade-offs. And some beneficiaries feel like they can't afford to make these trade-offs. They feel like they have no choice but to go into Medicare Advantage because they don't think they can afford a Medigap policy. So, and I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, that's plenty. Thank you. So the way we would characterize all the things that you walked through is that the deck is stacked in favor of Medicare Advantage and against traditional Medicare. What's lost as we lose traditional Medicare, as the program's becoming more privatized?
Well, I mean, I think some people really like the traditional Medicare program, and some people really value having a choice of doctors. Is this what you want to get into?
Sure.
Or were you thinking of something else?
I was thinking, that's where we're going next.
I mean, there are a lot of things that are lost. The payment system is totally weird when everybody gets into Medicare Advantage because payments are based on traditional Medicare. Even in a place like Miami right now, where more than 70% of people are in Medicare Advantage, the payment system is actually tied to costs in traditional Medicare. That just whacks out the system. That's a technical term. And so at some point, as more people are in Medicare Advantage, the current payment system has to be kind of tossed because if you can't base it on traditional Medicare if you have so few people in that system.
So let's go where you were going.
Okay.
All right. So we learned a little bit about what draws people towards Medicare Advantage, how the deck is stacked, as we would say, in favor of Medicare Advantage enrollment, but there are clearly trade-offs when it comes to Medicare Advantage. And I always trot out a tired old saying that when it comes to Medicare Advantage plans, some people swear by them, other people swear at them.
See, that's because he's clever.
That's clever. I thought about it years ago. Yeah. I'm getting a lot of mileage out of it.
That's good.
Thank you.
Good.
And from where we sit, as a consumer advocacy organization, we only hear about the problems. We don't hear about the success stories. But while we spend a lot of our time trying to address barriers to care in the traditional Medicare program, it's been our experience that those barriers are exacerbated when one is enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan, combined with the fact that there are additional barriers that are unique to Medicare Advantage, including narrow networks and extensive prior authorization. So based upon the research that KFF has done, what would you say are some of the trade-offs that Medicare beneficiaries have when they enroll in Medicare Advantage versus traditional Medicare?
As you just said, narrower networks can be a big issue. And I think people are not generally aware of what that means until they get sick. And so that's the issue. People are making choices when they go on Medicare. It's like 65, 66, 67, whatever they do. And that's when you're the healthiest on Medicare. But when you get sick, if you get a serious illness like a rare form of cancer or whatever is your scariest disease, you might want to see a doctor in another part of the country who's a specialist in your condition. And the issue there is your plan might not let you go out of network. And so that's a concern for people when it might really matter. And we have looked in the past at narrow networks, and we're continuing to do work on that. So you'll see some work from us out of that. We have also looked at prior authorization, as you mentioned. And what we saw when we looked a couple of years ago is that there were 32 million prior author requests in that 1 year and 2 million denials. You can see how that varies across insurers. What we don't know is denials by type of service. And that is because the data are not collected and released. So that is a real liability. That is a real shortcoming because consumers can't say, I'd like to pick a plan, but I don't want to pick a plan that keeps denying post-acute care or denies care for Part B drugs, which I take, or whatever it is. That information is not available, and that is a concern. That's part of more utilization review, which is a hassle factor. One of the interesting things we're now hearing, we're not like you, we don't actually help people, so we don't hear about their problems.
You've helped me.
We don't help real people.
No offense taken.
Disrespect.
No.
But we're hearing a lot more from providers than we've ever heard before because of the hassles that they say they're encountering. Hospitals are saying they're dealing more with prior authorization. They're also saying that they're unable to get their patients approval to go to post-acute settings. So they're unhappy because people are lingering in the hospital for too long. Post-acute providers are saying that they're having difficulty extending stays for what they say is a long enough period of time to get people back to stability. So I think it'll be interesting to hear how this unravels for providers. We heard this year that a bunch of hospitals were actually terminating agreements with the Medicare Advantage plans. Now, whether this is posturing because they want their rates, they want to be paid more, or real, it's an issue for consumers who might just hang in from one year to the next and find out that their beloved local hospital is no longer in network. Other concerns that we've talked about are potential higher out-of-pocket costs in Medicare Advantage. And actually, we did work that showed that there are higher out-of-pocket costs, particularly relative to people in traditional Medicare who have Medigap. No ability to select a separate drug plan. If you're in a Medicare Advantage plan, you get a drug plan. The good thing about that is it's the one-stop shopping thing I mentioned before. The downside is you can't choose among drug plans, and we have found the drug plans vary quite a bit in the drugs that they cover and the costs that they charge. And so that is a trade-off that probably 5 people are aware of. And finally, this limited ability to switch back to traditional Medicare because of the Medigap issue.
So if I can sum up using my words, not yours, Medicare Advantage plans are paid an excessive amount, but we have little to show for it. The data is not there, in part. The data that is there is decidedly mixed. Again, my words.
You're kind of forcing me to, yes, and yeah. You're kind of forcing me to say, but people are generally satisfied with, you'll hear that people are really satisfied with Medicare Advantage. We have shown that they're also really satisfied with traditional Medicare. So generally, people are satisfied until they're not. And that's where you come in.
Fair enough. So because I've been accused of focusing mostly on the negative, I do want to sort of end on a more positive note from our standpoint, is significant policy changes that have come about recently with respect to beneficiary out-of-pocket costs and Medicare programmatic costs as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act that made significant changes to prescription drug payment, or prescription drug coverage in Medicare. Can you talk a little bit about the IRA?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really big deal. And what's stunning is what we call them our posers. These are our pollsters in-house. They have shown that most people are unaware of these major provisions that are in the Inflation Reduction Act, and many older adults are unaware. So this was a huge fight. This took a lot of effort, and there's strong public opinion support for virtually any policy that will help with drug costs. And so, miracle of all miracles, Congress was able to cobble together a hugely significant package with numerous provisions that help people with their drug costs. It's just kind of unfortunate that so many people don't know about them, but let's look at what they are. Having the government negotiate drug prices. I've heard, it's like since the drug law passed, this has been something that at least Democrats were talking about, because there was this like poison pill that was put in the law that said the government shall not negotiate drug prices, called the non-interference clause. For years, policymakers talked about that's crazy, because when there are no competitors and expensive drugs come to market, what are you going to do? You have to be able to do something, and now there's something in place. The process is ongoing. The first set of drugs, the subject to price negotiation, will take effect in 2026. Next, doing something about drug prices rising faster than inflation. My personal favorite coming next, which is the out-of-pocket cap, which actually helps people take hugely expensive drugs, so that this year, people who took drugs that would cost them $10,000 to $12,000 a year will only pay about $3,400, $2,000 next year. There's the insulin cap. There's the Part D low-income subsidy expansion that many of you worked on, and help eliminating cost sharing and expanding coverage for vaccines. So these are really huge changes that will help people who have difficulty affording their medications, and I think it's something that deserves more attention.
So last question. We have an election coming up. Elections have consequences. Different administrations have different policy goals. What are some of the things we know about or think that might happen in Medicare policy if the administration stays the same versus what might happen if there's a change in administration, and of course control of Congress too? What's been out there on the policy horizon? Is that a fair question, or do you want to
it's a fair
pass?
question.
Should I say we've run out of time? Because I could do that.
We've run out of time.
Yeah.
Next question?
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Look, both, I think you can expect President Biden to keep at it, right? Like, he has sort of expressed an interest in doing things, and I think he will continue to push forward and do what he's doing. I think if former President Trump is elected, it's not clear what he would do with Medicare. If you take his words, if you take him at his word is he's not going to touch Medicare. He's not going to cut Medicare. He's not going to cut benefits for seniors. I just happened to look up all of his quotes yesterday, or actually Alex did, and those are his words. And truthfully, during his administration, they mostly focused on prescription drugs. I think that, you could see different things going on at the congressional level. So I think congressional races could be where you see Medicare playing a bigger issue. The Republican Study Group, for example, has put out premium support, which is very controversial, probably something we don't have time to get into right now. The Inflation Reduction Act is something that I think Democrats will be talking a lot about. I think Republicans might not talk so much about that since they voted, I think, to a person against the Inflation Reduction Act. Possibly there were some exceptions, but it was a very tight partisan vote. They could be talking about the Medicare Advantage payment rule, which came out recently, which the industry has said is a major cut to Medicare Advantage plans and is going to result in cuts in benefits. That's a hypothetical. I mean, overall, plans will get an increase. So it's a hypothetical possible cut, which I just wonder about. We'll know soon enough, but I suspect plans have a very strong incentive to keep offering extra benefits because they market based on that, and that attracts people. But I can see local elections. I can see congressional elections and Senate elections focus a lot on Medicare because Medicare is always a hot button election issue.
So, Patricia, when we were planning this conference, I lobbied to have this session last 3 hours, but I was shot down. So it's better to leave folks wanting more, hearing more from you, than to go too long. So we are out of time. I want to thank Tricia. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. But before I leave the stage for now, because it's hard for me to leave and give up the spotlight, but I'm told I have to do that, I want to introduce our first voice of Medicare of the day, Peter Morley. Peter Morley is a remarkable advocate who took his own health struggles and without the infrastructure of an organization or group or financing of one, became a one-man champion for countless others as he challenges legislators to protect access to health care, including the Affordable Care Act and traditional Medicare. Before I had the pleasure of getting to know Peter better, I was aware of him based on his voluminous social media presence, which includes posting interviews that he conducts with actual members of Congress and holding them to account to protect health care. Peter could not make the trip down from New York with us today, but he did record some remarks for us that we'd like to play for you now, but it looks like Judy wants to say something.
No, we'll watch this.
We'll watch the video. Okay. Great.
My name is Peter Morley. I wanted to welcome you to the Center for Medicare Advocacy's National Voices of Medicare Summit. As someone who has subsisted on traditional Medicare for 15 years, I am so grateful to be here. Medicare saved my life. In 2007, when I became permanently disabled from an accident and unable to work, I was fortunate to be spared the entire cost of my medical bills because I had continuous insurance coverage. I applied for Social Security disability, which made me eligible for Medicare, and I am so thankful to have been approved. Since my initial disability, I have had diagnoses that have catapulted me well above 10 pre-existing conditions. I learned how your health can change in an instant. In 2013, I was diagnosed with lupus. The chronic fatigue that I fight every day makes it a struggle to get out of bed. I take 38 different medications yearly and self-inject myself with biologic treatments weekly. Without access to my traditional Medicare, I would lose my network of 20 doctors that work so hard to keep me stable and alive. And without traditional Medicare, I would have perished. People on Medicare have shared with me through social media that because of threats to cutting this vital program, that they feel alone, scared, and afraid when they should be focusing their energy on their own well-being without undue stress. Stress triggers illness and disease and can be deadly. This is an incredibly personal component as to why in the last 7.5 years, I have traveled to Washington, D.C. 37 times. I have collected the healthcare stories of thousands of people who have voiced their personal stories and concerns with me. I've held over 800 advocacy meetings with Democratic and Republican members of Congress alike. I've also had the honor to testify in Congress before 3 separate House committees. When I became eligible for Medicare in 2009, I chose enrollment in traditional Medicare versus a Medicare Advantage plan because I wanted the largest network of doctors possible. And I also did not want to be subjected to prior authorizations that could delay or deny my care. And this choice saved my life. I subsequently was diagnosed with 2 separate incidental findings of early stage cancers, and thanks to traditional Medicare, I was able to have the life-saving surgeries immediately. My Medigap plan gives me a guarantee issue right because of where I live here in New York. Only 3 other states, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Maine, offer this. Sadly, the ACA protections against discrimination towards pre-existing conditions did not extend to Medigap plans, and we must recognize this is unfinished business. Most people are unaware that they can be discriminated against by a Medigap plan in one of these 46 states if they initially have or acquire a pre-existing condition on Medicare Advantage and want to switch to traditional Medicare. This must change. As a patient advocate, I want you to know that you have the power to help. You don't have to travel to DC as I have, but you can vote for people who want to enhance traditional Medicare. You can share your health stories with your 3 members of Congress. You can encourage your loved ones to share their stories and concerns as well. I want you to know that there is always hope and to never, ever give up. There is incredible strength in numbers. Your voice truly matters. I have seen how my story, along with yours, has impacted members of Congress because by sharing your healthcare journeys, you're putting a human face to what would otherwise be considered data. And we are not data. We are not numbers. Thank you all for listening and for fighting for Medicare. Please join me in making a promise to never stop fighting until we expand Medicare benefits A dream of mine would be for traditional Medicare to include dental, vision, and hearing. And that is just the start. Those of us on Medicare desperately need the program to be accessible and affordable, as most of us live on fixed incomes. I know I do. My wish is I live to see this day. Thank you so much for listening.
Now it's my pleasure to invite Luke Liss to come up to the podium and to tell you a bit about his predecessor, if you will, Alfred J. Chiplin Jr., who was the managing attorney at our Washington, D.C. office. And before that, many of you from Justice and Aging may know that he was a colleague of yours at the National Senior Citizens Law Center. Chip was also an ordained minister, a beautiful singer, and a pianist. And there with Mr. Homer T., Chip had a smile you could die for. Chip brought a beloved community wherever he went. He was a strategist quietly in the field of law, particularly focusing on discharge rights. He was a dear, dear friend. He worked tirelessly for systemic change and hung on the phone for hours and did research for hours in order to help individuals who called with their particular problems. His influence is still felt at the center every day, and it is really a determination that Chip's memory be part of the community, this blessed community that works to advance change for all human beings. I have one particular memory of Chip towards the end of his too short life, and that was visiting him in the hospital and then at home, which my colleagues and I did a lot. First, his family was remarkable, and I have special greetings and gratitude to you, Luke, from his sister Lucille, who couldn't be here today because she herself lives with MS and is having treatment today. But the way they cared for him and for one another. And also his hospital room and house was but the UN, right? Those of you who may recall, he had a personal trainer. You could see how little Chip had gotten from, I think, Poland. A student came in one day to visit him, Kata, I think you were there, who I think Chip hardly remembered, but said he had changed his whole life. I believe he was an immigrant from Iran, I think, and he wanted to bring his new wife to meet Chip, and did so at Chip's bedside because Chip had been so important in his life. Chip brought civility and extreme determination to fight for social justice in a civil way, in a determined way, according to the law and to morality. I know many of you around the room remember him so well. Charlie and Brian and Lori and Trish and Toby, Leslie. And I think it's something that we often forget to do, and that is to remember stars and stellar folks to inspire our work. I have the honor of knowing Luke Liss through his work as a pro bono attorney and a really fun colleague, even under stress. I remember Luke was introduced to the center by Gilda Ford, who isn't with us today because he doesn't fly so much since COVID. But Gil knew Luke, your firm, and through your firm, we got to work with Luke. And at one point, Gil said to Luke, I don't know if you recall this, but I don't really know anything about Medicare, but anything you need to know, they'll tell you. Well, Gil had been our litigation director before Allie for a decade. And he did learn about Medicare, as did Luke. But most importantly, Luke brought a sense of determination and, damn it, yes, we can, and we can keep going forward. And then this incredible crackerjack team to work on a trial that we could simply have not done without the resources from his firm, Wilson Sonsini, which is a sponsor here today. And as Ali and Wei, there's no far too much about, that case is almost like it competes with the Dickens tale in Bleak House. We are honoring you today for leading Wilson Sonsini's extraordinary pro bono legal advocacy work. Luke's pro bono work with the center includes assistance in our nationwide class action cases, which we strive to win appeal rights and coverage policy changes for certain Medicare beneficiaries in two particular major cases, one for those who are placed in hospital observation status, and in the Jimmo versus Sebelius case, which we are trying to have open doors to Medicare and quality care for people who need to maintain their conditions or slow decline. And I want to ask you to all join me in congratulating Luke Liss, who stands in the shoes of one incredible mentor, Alfred Chiplin. And if I can read this, Alfred J. Chiplin Award, awarded to an individual who works to advance civility in society and social justice for all. To Luke Liss, in recognition of his ability to mix his passion for justice, compassion for people, with a commitment to using the law to right wrongs. He is a champion for people in need, and like Chip, his smile lights up a room.
I don't know about that, but you're too kind. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And also for you, I have Preet Bharara's Doing Justice.
Oh, great.
It's a wonderful book.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. Wow. Could we put the picture of Chip back up for this, if possible? Alfred J. Chiplin. So, Chip, I've learned a lot about him the last few weeks, talking to Judy, reading about him, watching videos of the past summit, and it's just an incredible honor to even have my name mentioned with somebody like that. I don't know about the beautiful smile. I definitely don't have a beautiful voice, but to be honored to do this work is such a joy, and I just can't believe it. But somebody like Chip, I think about his lifetime of service and his lifetime of work and how he conducted himself. The managing attorney for the DC office, a pastor, somebody who treated everyone with grace, who worked joyfully to the end. Just such a beautiful and enduring legacy. And I know you mentioned Lucille, who I know is on the board and carrying that forward, and his loving family, and I just want to say hello to all of you. You know, I never had the pleasure of meeting Chip, but I feel like I know him, and I feel like his legacy echoes so much in my experiences with the Center for Medicare Advocacy, with our great friends at Justice and Aging, too, who we've worked with so much together, and it really is special. And I think about it a lot in terms of with our work with the center, I'll call it CMA, you know, I've always been so impressed with their heart and their skill and just the innate kindness and determination to advocate for the most vulnerable in our society. I think it's really special. And it's kind of a funny thing to me, and Judy's always way too kind to me. But whether it's Allie, whether it's Judy, or whether it's Gil, so often they'll email me and just say, like, thank you for all the help you're doing, all you're doing. Thank you. And I'm like, really, I should be thanking them. And so I kind of will take that opportunity today to do that. But it really is just such a blessing for us to be able to do this work, both experientially, in terms of the experience we get, but as well as emotionally and spiritually. One of the things my great friend Gilda Ford said to me often, especially early on, and I am very disappointed in you, Gil, that you're not here today, but I hope you're watching, is he'd say, Luke, you're on the side of the angels. You're on the side of the angels when you're doing this work, and I'll go back to that in a little bit, but it's something that really stuck with me. And you know, as I said, we got much more out of our work with CMA than I feel like we gave. And just an example of that is the Barrows trial to me. So, or we could call it the Odyssey, whatever we want to call it. That is a nationwide class action on behalf of patients who we allege were misclassified as on observation status as opposed to inpatient. And I think we joined that case in about 2015. And it was myself and my now litigation partner and close friend Dylan Savage, who really took the lead early on in that case and worked on it. And the thing that I really think back and stick out is just what an amazing experience it was to watch Dylan as a lawyer. She had come over recently to the firm, to Wilson Sonsini. She was in the New York office, and we kind of met and started working together on that case. And just to see her grow, she was fairly junior. We were both associates at the time, and we were doing all that is entailed in litigation, dealing with the government, with Ali, numerous motions for summary judgment, trial prep, all of that. And then to ultimately get to trial and to see Dylan do such brilliant direct and cross-examinations of witnesses and just be such a crucial part of us winning. And then, as a part of that too, the partners on the case, David Berger and Steve Guggenheim, just both wonderful mentors and wonderful attorneys, giving us the space to really contribute when we were just associates. I thought all of that was really special, and it led to Dylan and I working together on so many other cases and having such a ripple effect. And we both ultimately made partner, not in small part based off of our pro bono work. So that's just one example of how working with CMA was so great for us. And as far as our firm, numerous other people being involved and it being such a team effort. It also introduced us to the Hartford Yard Goats. I don't know how many of you are familiar with them, but in a break in the trial, we got to enjoy a Hartford Yard Goats minor league baseball game, and it was just so much fun. That was the one argument Dylan and I ever had, really, is we wanted to do a picture with all our Hartford Yard Goats memorabilia, and maybe we were doing the Yard Goats horns, and she did not want to be in the picture with us. So, but there you go. So, and then when I think about, you know, just the work that CMA does day in and day out and how difficult it is, and I want to go back to that in a little bit, but another thank you I just have to give is just for my firm, Wilson Sonsini, and just the incredible support that it has for pro bono, for community impact, and it's just really been my home, and it's really special. And just one small example of that is today with me I have our staff pro bono coordinator, Rodolfo Munoz, who came out from California. He doesn't fly often, but he came out to support me. And then also my partner, Stephen Johnson, who is the co-head of our appellate group right here in DC, who's on the pro bono committee and such a supporter of our pro bono efforts in so many ways and in mentoring people. And I think it's really emblematic of the firm in that across all of our offices, we have so many people who are engaged in these efforts, so many people who are working so hard and so dedicated and with so much heart. And it really starts with the leadership of our managing partner, Doug Clark, and our chair of the board, Katie Martin, at the firm. Not only are they both great leaders who I learned so much from, but they have incredible support for our pro bono and community impact efforts. And to me, that really reflects the strength of a firm and when you lean into those so much. And besides that, they're just fantastic people, and I learned so much from both of them. And I got to say, too, with Doug, it's like we recently moved into a new building. I sit right down the hall from him, and he's always, always patient and willing to have conversations and so interested in everything we're doing. And so it really extends across the firm, and it goes beyond even just pro bono. So we also have a very active community service program at our firm. Last year in 2023, we did over 140 community service projects across the country, and these range from building care kits for families staying at the Ronald McDonald House to food drives and food sorts, clothing drives, supporting survivors with cards, and and other materials, and just really leaning into our communities and supporting each other. And huge and key to that is my dear friend, Gail McFall, our head of community impact. And I know Gail is watching here today. So Gail, I just want you to know that it's such an honor and privilege to work with you and see your energy every day. She's another person that really reminds me of Chip in how she approaches life and her work with such joy. And you know, when I think about that, there's people who have echoed throughout time. When I came to the firm, I was a very junior, young. I didn't know from law firms. I basically chose Wilson Sonsini because we have really cool clients, which we do. We all use their products every day, and it's such interesting work. But also just because the people were so genuine and welcoming and kind to me. And a huge example of that was my mentor, Harry Bremond, who would have been great friends with Chip. Harry was one of the first black attorneys in the California Bay Area. He says he's the first. So I agree with him, because you don't really argue with Harry too much. And I hope he's watching today too. At 89 years young, he remains a powerhouse and just a mentor to so many people, regardless of what your background is. And he really instilled that to me, that we don't have to look exactly like each other to care about each other, to support each other, to work with each other well. And he's just been so instrumental. He was the black male figure I never really had growing up. And so I'm just so thankful for that. Similarly, my brother, Mark Parnes, our recently retired general counsel. And, you know, I call him my brother. He's about a foot taller than me. He's white. He's got a full head of blonde hair, great smile, all things I don't have. But, you know, to me, family is a lot more than what your blood is. It's the people you really connect with and care about and support. And Mark was also a mentee of Harry's, which shows the inclusivity of those types of relationships we have at the firm. But on top of his general counsel job, which is very demanding at any big law firm, he ran our pro bono program for years, and he saw in me something that said he thought maybe I should be more and more involved. And I wouldn't be here as a pro bono partner, equity partner, which is still very rare in big law firms, if it weren't for the support of Mark Parnes and the vision of Doug Clark to make that happen and place importance on it. So I could talk about our firm all day long, and I do that all the time, but I just really want to emphasize just how special of a place it is and how thankful I am for all of the support across the firm. And so if I can, I also want to think about and talk a little bit about our clients that we work with. And I know one of the things I'm always struck by with CMA is how much folks like Allie, how much folks like Judy, how much folks like Gil are focused on the stories of the people that we're advocating for, and Wei as well. And it just really is something that is touching to me, and not just in these cases, but in all of our cases, whether it's immigration, civil rights, working for nonprofits that are supporting sustainability. It's just something that, to me, I can't believe I get paid for this. I get to go into work and do this every day to advocate for people. And, you know, here in D.C., it reminds me of our latest impact litigation. If I could just share a little bit about that it's also really special for me. And it's on behalf of farmer. It involves farming, which to me is just central to the fabric of life in this great country. We're all touched by farming and farmers. I think it's such a noble profession. Our clients, Angie and June Provost, are fourth-generation farmers in Louisiana, and just wonderful people. And hello, Angie and June, if you're watching. People who really care about what they're doing, care about equality and fairness, and care about making an equitable system for all farmers. And so we filed about 2 weeks ago a proposed class action lawsuit against the USDA, alleging that the USDA has discriminated against black farmers, farmers of color, for over 100 years. And for Angie and June, this isn't about handouts, this isn't about special treatment, it's about fair treatment for all farmers. And so we're so thankful to walk beside them and pursue this case pro bono. This issue has been litigated before, it's been settled before, but it didn't end the problem. And so what we want is to bring the same pro bono energy we bring to the Medicare cases and see if we can end this discrimination for good and do right by all of our great farmers in this country. So thank you, Angie and June. And then when going back to the centrality of farming to life to everything that touches us all, healthcare does as well. It really does. Healthcare is something we all have encounters with the healthcare system. They're often sad, lonely, scary experiences. And one of the things that is so important to me about my work with CMA is, I mentioned Gil saying, look, Luke, you're on the side of the angels over and over. Luke, you're on the side of the angels when you're doing this work. I think he thought that I was going to bail early on or something like that. But there's a couple things that he didn't know. Like, once we're in, we're all in. And then the other thing was just how deeply that moved me when he said that, because I'd had my own experience with the healthcare system, and I had my own angel that walked with me through it. And that was my adopted mom, Sue Ellen Liss, who's also here today. When I was 18 years old, I was in a severe car accident, and I fractured my C1 and C2 vertebrae. What we didn't know at the time, I was misdiagnosed, like many people are. They told me to go home and walk it off. You'll be fine. Here's a couple pills. You'll be fine. But we knew something wasn't right. And, but at the time I was 18, it was a lot different time. If I didn't have someone to advocate for me, I wouldn't be here today. For a lot of reasons, if it weren't for my mom, I wouldn't be here today. But that is definitely one of them. And she became the most fierce advocate you could ever imagine with the healthcare system, taking us back, demanding that they do more scans until they did discover the fractures. She was there and held my hand when they put the halo on, screw by screw, through all of the depression and physical therapy and setbacks and all that followed through all the years. And so when I think about that, I just really think about all the people who don't necessarily have that in their lives, or don't have somebody with them who can walk with them through these really vulnerable times. And as the gentleman before said, your health can change in an instant, and it really can. And so I think that's what's so special to me about all of your work and about CMA's work and about Justice and Aging's work, is you really do walk on the side of the angels for a living, and you live with that every day, and it's a really heavy burden. And so I hope you take care of yourselves too. I also think about people like Dr. Ann Sheehy, who was our expert witness in the Barrows case, who spends so much of her professional life advocating for patients, and I just admire it. I admire what you do so much. It's so important. It makes such a big difference. And all of you could really be doing anything. Like working in the for-profit world and seeing that, the talent at CMA, at all the organizations we work with, you could be doing anything, but you choose to do this very vital and important work. So I really want to thank you with that. And if I can kind of close out in some of the words of Chip, who I really do feel like I know, and it's so wonderful to see his beautiful smile, and Homer T as well. I didn't know about that, but I would love to know Homer T as well. But Chip wrote a beautiful poem, and if I could share that with you a little bit, it's when you consider the sky, reach with all you have, give of your very best, and taste your dreams. And it's beautiful. To be here with all of you is to celebrate Chip, to honor CMA, to have my mom here with me. It's really a dream for us, so thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks. Thank you.
Now I'm going to ask Kata Cortez, our senior policy attorney, and her panel to come forward to talk about all manner of advocacy to lead to change. Thank you. How do we make good trouble?
Thank you, Judy. Welcome, everyone, to our panel discussion for the 11th Annual National Voices of Medicare Summit and Senator Jay Rockefeller Lecture, Pathways to Change. At the Center for Medicare Advocacy's annual summit, we take the opportunity to celebrate Medicare and all this social insurance program has done to improve the lives of older adults and their families, while also examining policy changes that could enhance the program, expand coverage, fill in gaps in care, and improve health equity. While we focus on analyzing proposed rules, legislative texts, and policy proposals to determine the nuanced changes that will improve Medicare, we also know that formulating the proper policy is only part of the battle in making programmatic changes. Effective advocacy with the administration, with Congress, and if necessary through the courts, is central to making abstract policy proposals come to life in order to ensure proper implementation, effective oversight, and accurate application of Medicare laws and policies in order to improve care, outcomes, and quality of life for Medicare beneficiaries. It is through this lens that we will begin our presentation from our expert panel, after I briefly introduce them, to discuss various approaches to advocacy. For their detailed bios, please look to the Summit program. First, we'll hear from Melissa Burrows, Director of Public Policy, CareQuest Institute for Oral Health. Next to present will be Afton Sissel, Deputy Chief of Staff, Rep. Lloyd Doggett from Texas. And finally, we will hear from the 2024 Alfred J. Chiplin Jr. Social Justice and Advocacy Awardee, Luke Liss. After our presentations, we'll have a Q&A with our panel and welcome questions from the audience. And I would also like to take a moment to thank our panel sponsors, AARP, SEIU, Alzheimer's Association, and Santa Fe Group for their generous support. I'm very pleased to welcome our panel, and we'll now turn things over to Melissa. And you can use the clicker or just ask them to move your slides.
Perfect. Great. Hey, folks. I'm Melissa Burrows. I'm the Director of Public Policy at the CareQuest Institute for Oral Health. And until recently, I worked in coalition with many of you through my previous work at Families USA as well. So it's really great to be back working with you all again. And I'm going to be talking about collective action as a advocacy pathway and coalition building in partnership to achieve policy change. So next slide. Or I can do it. Okay. For those of you that aren't familiar with the CareQuest Institute for Oral Health, we are a catalyst for systems change. We work across a number of areas of activation. Most people are familiar with us through our philanthropy work, but we also do a large amount of research in-house, education of oral health providers. We do our own policy and advocacy work, and we are building out a whole area around health transformation and looking at what that can look like in the oral health field. So we are doing a lot to change the system and ensure that oral health is no longer sort of forgotten and left behind. And one of our key areas we're working on that is in the Medicare space with many of you. And we do that in partnership with many of you, which I'll talk a little bit about going forward. Next slide. So why I'm here to talk about collective action and coalition building as part of the path to policy change is because policy change is hard, as you all know. It requires shifting power structures. It requires getting people that have a lot of resources on your side. And it requires getting attention. It requires all manner of strengths. And no one person can do this alone. No one organization can do this alone most of the time. And collaboration is key to moving that very hard problem. And that's why we work together in an organized way and collectively to make those changes that we seek. And so I'm not going to read this quote, but I encourage you to do so, as I think it really kind of sums up how we show up in coalition with each other and why that's so important and how it can be so motivating and empowering along the way as well. All right, next slide. I do want to highlight that when I'm talking about collective action and coalition work and advocacy in general, we're not just talking about, you know, some of the big flashy work that we're doing here in DC with Congress and all that. That is definitely part of it, but there are opportunities for collective action at all levels of policy change, from just raising an issue in your, county commission to all the way up to some of these national level discussions that we're all a part of. So collective action for policy change and coalition building is a strategy that is part of advocacy at all levels and something that can be really powerful no matter where you're kind of seeking it out. Next slide. And some of the ways I want to highlight getting involved in collective action are kind of broadening the scope of what we're looking at. So there are formal collaboration opportunities. Coalition building is one that we talk about a lot and that we're going to focus on today. It can also look like participation in broader action efforts like a day of action or a sign-on letter or things like that. Many of you are familiar with these activities. There's also looser ways to coordinate and take action together that I think are just as important and part of all of our work and maybe more appropriate depending on where you sit, which includes just being part of a broader network that's focused on an issue, joining a learning community where people are sharing information across states, across issue areas. All of these different collaboration models are important and keep us moving forward in the same direction and can be inclusive of all kinds of people and organizations depending on how you're coming to the work. This is both an opportunity to join something that exists, but also if there's a vacuum, feel free to start your own. And there are organizations like CareQuest that want to work with you in that. So that's a very loose overview of what collective action can look like. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about coalition building on the next slide, which is one of the most formal and powerful ways that we can bring organizations together to create policy change. There's a lot of different definitions of coalition building. Some people have a very strict definition of what a coalition can be. Some people have a more broad definition. For me, I think it's both groups that come together to coordinate their action, but also that have sort of a shared mission and vision for what the change should look like, and that bring their strengths together to create the change that they seek. And so that's something that I have had the pleasure of doing with many of you in this room. But it also requires being thoughtful and strategic in who you have at your table and ensuring that there aren't gaps. There is an initial question of how do you build a strong coalition that ensures that the people who are affected by the problem are represented, as well as all of the stakeholders in the issue. It's always important to assess our existing coalitions and see who is not represented at those and how we can be more inclusive and broader in scope. And then thinking about what are all the different strengths that we want to bring to the table, who has what relationships, who has what skill sets, who has what resources, what information can we share with each other, and what can we learn from each other across the board, I think is the very basics of how you build a strong coalition, and something that has proven to be effective even in its simplicity in bringing powerful voices together and in moving conversations. So this is all very high level and sort of theoretical, but I am going to get into an example that is specific to the Medicare oral health work, and I think can kind of shine some light on what the strategic pieces of this are. So you can go to the next slide. And that this has been referenced a couple of times today, that there has been a recent recognition that Medicare does not cover dental, vision, and hearing, and a recent recognition in its public stance. This has been a long, ongoing problem, as many of you know. And part of the reason that this issue has really broken through in the public stage and in policymakers' minds is because of the coalition efforts that have brought this issue to the forefront. So CareQuest is part of this movement. Many of you are part of this movement. I've been part of this movement through my current role and previous role. And it's really been empowering to be part of this effort because it is so wide-reaching and because it draws on so many different strengths and people that are in different places in the movement. So the coalition that I'm most been part of, there are many that have worked on this issue, is both the Medicare Oral Health Coalition, and then more loosely there is a network of oral health stakeholders called the Oral Health Progress and Equity Network, which also does a lot of that information sharing and coordination while it is not as formally organized around a specific goal. And through these different pieces, there have been opportunities to bring in consumer advocates, oral health advocates, patient advocates. There are very strong connections to the Medicare for All movement and Medicare improvement movements. And there's also been a more productive way to approach industry collaboration as a result of these structures. There isn't universal industry support for improving Medicare dental coverage, but there are pockets within industry that are very supportive. And so I think building out these coalition frameworks and also having this looser network where people can share information has meant that people are connected to each other and sharing their strengths and insights in a way that can kind of build connections that get around some of that opposition, and then also sometimes don't. And the other piece of this I really want to highlight is the Consortium on Medically Necessary Medicare Dental Coverage, which is an additional coalition that many of you are also aware of and a part of, that has really kind of taken a lot of what we've learned in this broader effort and had a sort of a synergistic moment where we are able to advance administrative action to incrementally improve Medicare dental coverage. And that has been a huge win. And I think that that coalition that is focused on that specific pathway is a good example of the power of coalitions, but also a good example of how coalitions can work together to kind of feed off of each other. And so to close, I think I just want to show sort of what we've achieved with these coalition efforts over the past few years, which is on the last slide, which is just sort of the progress we've made since really 2019. Coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act that we heard about earlier today, Medicare dental, vision, and hearing benefits are the most popular policy that wasn't addressed. So, you know, we've seen a lot of progress in Congress over the past 5 years or so in terms of this issue getting more and more attention. We've seen that progress and attention in Congress translate also into action through the Biden administration. But up until these past 5 years, no one was talking about this. This was sort of, except for Afton's boss, but there were very few people talking about this. And this sort of ability to get this issue on the radar has made a huge difference, both in terms of its popularity with the public and the attention that policymakers are paying. And I look forward to working with you all on this issue as we carry forward in coalition together.
Hi, good afternoon. It's great to be with y'all. My name is Afton Sissel. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff to Congressman Lloyd Doggett, who represents Austin, Texas. He is the ranking member of the Ways and Means Health Subcommittee, and I manage the Health Subcommittee work for him in addition to our legislative team. So I'm here to talk to you about legislative advocacy. So to start off, I would say I want to push back a little bit on one of Melissa's sides in terms of who is part of a coalition. She listed a lot of different actors. Members of Congress and their staff are also part of your coalitions, at least if you're doing it well. And so the way that you bring us into the fold is by building relationships on the Hill. And this first point, I cannot emphasize enough. Please come meet us in person. We, consumer advocates, are vastly outnumbered and out-resourced by various industry stakeholders. They're all on the Hill all day, every day. Vast majority of my time is spent meeting with industry lobbyists because this is who is coming and requesting the meetings every day. And they are coming in person. And they have since the moment we came back to the Hill. I was back the moment I was fully vaccinated. Full time, never went back home. This is what the Hill is. I know that for nonprofits and consumer advocates, a lot of you work virtually or in a hybrid method, but we're all back in person. Industry recognized it. They came back in person. They were there in June 2021. It would be lovely to see your faces on the Hill. In-person interactions are just so important for establishing a meaningful connection with somebody. And it's been a little sad, the number of people that I have met here today, that it's the first time I'm meeting them in person, but I've known them for years. I have worked closely with them for years. But the reason I know them well is just because of my boss's priorities and my priorities. Most staff on the Hill don't know who you are, and I am frequently being asked, who works on this? Like, what are the organizations and who are the people at those organizations that I need to talk to, because they don't actually know. And so please come see us. And when you do, if you represent state chapters and local chapters, try and bring constituents with you. I know this can be expensive. You may not be able to do it every year for every meeting, but as much as you possibly can, or if you can arrange meetings in their home states and in their district offices, including constituents, is always really powerful, so we can hear their stories directly, and it gets the member a little more interested. They have more equity in this issue when you include them. Make sure when you come you have concrete asks. Please don't come and do an introductory meeting. We are incredibly busy. We get countless meeting requests. We do have to turn people away sometimes. Have an agenda when you come. Have like meaningful action items, steps that we can take afterwards. It'll be more productive for you and for us. And make sure as part of the meeting you also ask about their members' agenda so that you can find areas of common ground where you can collaborate with them, because what's on your agenda may not be top of mind for them, but they might be working on things that are closely related and that you would be interested in, and you can build some partnerships that way. And then I would say afterwards, make sure that you follow up, you reiterate your asks, and when they actually deliver, they co-sponsor a bill, sign a letter, whatever it is, spread the word, share it in newsletters, post it on social media, whatever you can do to thank them. It'll help, reaffirm for them that, I did the right thing and now my constituents know about it and this is helpful for me, and it, makes me feel a little more invested in working with this person in the future. Next, ways that you can capture the member's attention outside of meetings. Constituent mail, be that letters, emails, phone calls, letters to the editor, op-eds, and quotes in the press, particularly in their local papers, and attending events, town halls, district events, press conferences, whatever, wherever you can get some face time with them. Big thing when you are doing stuff in the press, be sure to name the member, because they get critical mentions every day. And so if you really want them to see your call to action, use their name. They will see it that way. But I would, of course, ask that please be respectful in the way that you talk about them and address them. And particularly when you're doing phone calls and sort of mass write-in campaigns, always use respectful language, and particularly on the phone calls, bear in mind, these are interns that are answering our phones. They're 18, 19 years old. They are shaky, they're nervous. It takes them a little while to build their confidence. Be patient, be kind to them. And please don't expect them to be able to directly answer your questions or to be able to tell you where the member is and where can you find them next. And please just don't badger our interns. Be kind, and also know that if you're aggressive with them, we take note and we flag it, and we will not be interested in cooperating. So when it comes to developing campaigns, Melissa went over some of this. First, you have to define your problem, build your research and data to support that a problem exists, identify a range of solutions. Some of them are going to be incremental steps you can take. Some will be more sweeping, broader goals that you eventually want to achieve. Then you need to build a diverse coalition around whatever campaign you've decided to embark on. When we talk about a diverse coalition, making sure that you think creatively about different types of stakeholders, not just various types of consumer advocacy groups, but also as much as you can engage industry. That's always helpful. Engage academics. There are lots of great academics and think tanks that we work very closely with. Try and get some interested pollsters. Polling data is incredibly powerful for moving the needle, especially on the Hill. And of course, make sure that you get members of Congress invested and you bring them into your coalition as well. So building a narrative, ways that we do this on the Hill. We can hold hearings on an issue. We have committee and floor speeches. We hold press conferences. We have town halls. We do op-eds, social media, story collection. Sometimes we go out and solicit our own stories. We'll send mailers to our constituents asking them to share their experiences with a particular issue. These are all ways that we try and build a narrative around the problem that we've identified, because you're not going to be able to build any momentum for your solution until you've gotten more attention on the problem itself. Responding to opposition, because there will always be some. As much as you can anticipate the arguments, that's helpful so that you can go ahead and start developing counter arguments and fact sheets and sort of fact versus fiction type materials that you can arm your allies with. Because whoever is already in the coalition and sort of leading your efforts, they're invested, they're true believers, but in order to actually accomplish something, you're going to need a lot of allies that are less invested. And so you need to make sure that you give them lots and lots of support. Go ahead and educate reporters, because the press can be a powerful way to build your narrative, but reporters, as we all know, are under-resourced, stretched thin. There's been lots of layoffs, and we need to make sure that we're giving them as much as we possibly can, as many materials, and developing relationships with good reporters that want to keep building a narrative on your particular issue. We've got a great example with one of our local reporters who, over the past, 5 or 6 years, has done a lot of reporting on the nursing home industry. And it was because we did a lot of work educating her on some of the problems that we were identifying, and we had held a hearing in the subcommittee related to this, and so we started feeding her ideas and material that she could build stories around. Now she's personally very invested. She's frequently reporting on it. Did just a couple days ago on the staffing standards because, again, we flagged it for her. But we actually have to do that work for her because she's a local reporter. She's really stretched thin and can't always pay attention to every little thing that's happening and everything that's happening in Washington because she's home in Austin. And so we send her lots of information. We put a lot of the legwork in, but it pays off in huge dividends because then all of our constituents are informed about what's going on, what the problems are, and all the good work that we're doing. Make sure that you investigate your opponents. Look for what are their funding sources. That is usually a powerful tool in being able to build your narrative and get folks to debunk a lot of what they're saying. We've had a lot of experience with this with sort of what we call shadow groups and dark money, where surprise medical billing was a great example of this, where private equity firms were actually funding a lot of these dark money campaigns to try and stop legislation that would ban surprise medical billing. And some consumer advocates and think tank folks, along with some investigative reporters, were able to figure out who was funding all of these ads, and there was some really great New York Times reporting that sort of exposed all of this, and then suddenly legislation that had been derailed and stalled for months was revived, and eventually we got it made into law by the end of the year. Not quite in the form that we wanted, but still a victory. And make sure that you utilize all of your partners. You tailor your outreach to folks, find the stakeholders that have the right kinds of relationships and the right kind of message for who your particular audience is. Inside, outside organizing. So, like I said, I think members of Congress and their staff can be really powerful allies and should genuinely be seen as part of your coalition. Please invite us into your spaces and let us work with you and do all of the creative thinking and planning, because I think that's where you have your best results, is when you're really all working together as a team, and it's not just the outside coming and trying to get us interested after you've already made a decision. We're going to have a lot of our own thoughts about what's possible and our own information, and so please bring us in as early as possible, particularly because information sharing is key. Stay in constant contact. See us as trusted partners. I understand not every staffer, not every member is going to have that kind of relationship with you. This goes back to the build a relationship with staff, because the ones that you can really trust, we're going to be great sources for you, and we need you to be resources for us, constantly exchanging information. I need to be hearing from folks on a daily basis if our campaign is really hitting its moment. Think about HR 3, the big prescription drug bill that passed in 2019 and was sort of the basis for what ended up in the Inflation Reduction Act. We were our coalition that was working on that and trying to strengthen that bill. We talked multiple times a day, and we met in person all the time, and we were constantly sharing information. It was really important to do that. Also, hold your powder dry. Don't immediately react the moment something is released. Take your time, digest it, see what's actually in it, and then formulate a response, and make sure that you're doing it together so that everybody is on the same page. You've got a uniform response, because the moment they start to see cracks in your coalition, you're going to have problems. They're going to work to separate you. And so as much as you can just hold your fire and work together. This was a big thing for so many of our big campaigns. We did this with nursing home staffing standards. We all stayed in communication. We all waited to put out our initial statements when the proposed rule was first put out, so that we had time to digest and make sure we would all say, thanks, but we also need more, and here's the more that we need. And we've all come together in agreement of what our general ask is going to be. And sticking together in that way has been so critical and helped us get to the final rule that we have on Monday, which still is not enough. And all of our lovely statements that have come out have said, thank you, this is wonderful. We need to keep working. There's still more to do. This is not what we asked for. We've got more to go. Make sure that you refine your goals and tailor your strategies along the way. You're going to have some wonderful ambition at the beginning. Things are going to change over time, and you're going to have to respond along the way. Don't be afraid to change your game plan. That's okay. And most importantly, stick together from start to finish. Because again, the moment there's fragments in your campaign, the tougher you're going to have with actually accomplishing anything at the end. And then my final piece of advice, realize there's never actually a finish line in this work. We have to maintain momentum. Don't get so caught up in the celebration and the praise. Make sure, remember what your end goal was. A lot of people say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That's wonderful and true, but also don't negotiate with yourself. Remember your goals. Remember that incremental is part of a much greater whole. You have to keep working, and we have to keep that momentum going. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the impact litigation that we've got involved in and how we work with nonprofits and that sort of thing. And I'll go a little bit faster. I thought a lot of what Afton was talking about is actually really relevant to dealing with law firms and partnering as well. So I thought that was really great advice. So at Wilson Sonsini, we do pro bono in all areas, from immigration to working with nonprofits, but one of the areas that we really focus on is impact litigation. And so, for example, with the Center for Medicare Advocacy, we've done at least 3 class actions, I believe 2 that I've been involved in, the Jimmo v. Sebelius, and then the Alexander v. Azar, or the Barrows matter, whatever you want to call it. It had so many different names because it went for like 7 or 8 years. And we also do multiple Torture Victim and Protection Act matters, which involve events in Colombia. So at the same time we were doing Barrows, we were doing another case, Naranjo v. Jimenez in Miami, that involved events in Colombia. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And we also do a lot of civil rights matters. So, for example, we have a trial coming up in July in New Orleans involving alleged police brutality against a brave black woman, and we're excited about that as well. And then we also do a lot of individual level matters. So, for example, we do a ton of work with veterans. We do a lot of work with survivors, whether it's trafficking survivors, immigration, domestic violence, a lot of individual representation. So those are kind of the main forms of litigation. We've done a little bit of education. We sometimes do FOIA requests as well, which can be relevant to your work. So I'll go to the next slide. I figured out how to do that correctly. I was terrified thinking that, because I was like, I never get those things right, but I did that time. But it's also just a button that's like green. It's like, but it is what it is. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the benefits to the firms and the individuals involved, because I think it may be helpful for you if and when you're approaching law firms about how they tend to think about doing pro bono and when they will get involved and when they don't get involved. So lawyers, one, tend to be very risk averse, and there's ways that you come at them which they may just be like, you know what, we can't do this because there's so many things that are coming through the door. It's hard to pick who they want to partner with. And so, and just one thing I'll note about that is the best way to do that is have relationships. So Judy mentioned Gil DeFord, and he was masterful at building relationships over time. One that he built was with David Berger, who is a very influential partner at Wilson Sonsini. They're both wonderful people. David knew that Gil would come to him with good cases that we could work together with, and then we knew how much we loved working with the Center for Medicare Advocacy, so we had that trust going in, and that was a way that we could relationship build and know, like, hey, we can work well with Center for Medicare Advocacy, we can work well with Justice and Aging. That's something we'll really take a close look at. But why I think firms do and should do this work, because they don't all do it, is I think one of the things that's really important to me and that I think about a lot, and I think this is probably something really relevant to Chip too, is to honor the privilege it is to practice law. Because it really is a privilege to be able to advocate, to be able to make change for people. And that's something we at Wilson Sonsini really emphasize to our attorneys, and that I think other firms do as well, is it really is an honor and a privilege, and we have an obligation to give back. And the ABA recommends at least 50 hours of pro bono a year. At our firm, most people do a lot more than that. Some don't, and that's fine too. But I think it's something that I think is really important for people. And the other thing about that is, I think when you engage in that work and when lawyers do that, it's a way to really kind of connect with themselves and even with the people in their lives. It's like a way you can explain what you're doing where people's eyes won't glaze over immediately. It's a lot more interesting than like securities litigation or regulation or things like that. And the second thing I really want to talk about, and this is a way you can pitch your work to law firms and to lawyers, is it really is great for building lawyers with diverse skill sets. And the example I'll use is Dylan Savage, my partner, who I talked about previously. When we were doing the Barrows trial and that sort of thing, as I mentioned, it was such a great experience for her to get direct examinations, cross-examinations, doing all that work for both of us. 3 weeks later, we were in Medellin, Colombia, doing depositions of paramilitary leaders in a hotel room. And for our other case, the Naranjo case, which I'll call the Macaco case. And that was a case where we represented the family members of an anti-coca activist who was murdered for essentially being a community activist in Colombia. And the reason why the case was in the United States is because the paramilitary leader had been extradited and convicted of drug trafficking in Florida. And so we sued him there with the Center for Justice and Accountability, which is also a wonderful nonprofit, much like the Center for Medicare Advocacy, who we have a lot of trust with. And we're now doing another really big case with. It would be a whole nother rabbit hole I won't go down right now. But it's really interesting. It involves, if you ever watch Narcos, it involves some of the events in season 1 at the Caesar's Palace of Justice. And I'll just leave it at that. But for Dylan and I to go from a Medicare trial and dealing with those issues in Hartford to depositions in Medellin and sitting across the table from paramilitary leaders who have killed hundreds of people and are very happy to tell you that as you're deposing them, it really gave us perspectives and made us much more versatile and nimble as lawyers to go on in our careers. And I think that's kind of an extreme example, but it shows you when lawyers are doing these cases, they're getting to do the depositions. They're getting to do the meet and confer with the government attorneys and the DOJ. It's a very valuable experience, and that's something I think you can pitch to firms of, hey, your teams are going to get to do this, and they're going to get that experience, because it's not something that they can usually organically reproduce themselves. A lot of times those aren't opportunities that they'll get for paying clients. But when they do get them, they then have those reps, and they often do a fantastic job. And so I think it's a lot of benefit to firms who see that, and that's one thing I really am proud of our firm for doing. And then building across groups and offices. Our world is seamless. Like there's more hybrid than people want a lot of the times when people aren't showing up in person. I also am a big believer in in-person communication, but it's so great to do both, to be able to do both and work hybrid and have those connections. And so we as a firm always work across our entire firm. We have 19 offices, and we work with teams in all of them. So in the Barrows case, we had attorneys from DC, Seattle, New York, Palo Alto, San Francisco, Los Angeles, all over the country, and we all work together. And that not only helps, in that case, it helps us answer emails at 6 in the morning or at 6 at night or divvy up work that way. It team builds. So like at the time we started Barrows, Dylan was in New York, I was in Palo Alto, and now we're very close colleagues who work on many things together. And I think that's true across our firm, and it's also across different practice groups, because we'll often have people do work that's a little bit different from their day job and work with people in other groups. And when you work with companies like ours, clients like Google, Netflix, and Salesforce and others, you're often bringing in different practice groups anyways, so it's extremely valuable to help build those relationships across groups, across offices. And then the last one I'll mention is just the opportunity to demonstrate true and sustained commitment to pro bono and the firm's capabilities. And why I think that's important, that may not be obvious, is so many of our clients, some of the ones I just mentioned, but so many more, they care about what type of citizens their law firms are. And it's a way they use to differentiate, increasingly so. And many of our clients, corporate clients, are wanting to be involved in pro bono themselves. And we will partner with them on things. We will do clinics. It's something they care about, and that's something you can mention to firms, and firms love to talk about it. And I think even things when firms are recognized, they all love it, and it increases the support. But I think it's a way that they can show that we have heart too. We honor the privilege it is to practice law. We care about our communities, which is very important. And so I think that's something. And it also does show a firm's capabilities. So, for example, the fact we have great partners, we're working with CMA and Justice and Aging, we're able to go to trial against the federal government and win at trial and then on appeal. Like, that's no small thing, and that's one case we're doing within the firm. So we can go to the last one. And so just the impact, I think, that firms can have on matters is when you have the right partnerships, they can make an impact. Like, I can free up Allie to do more of what she does best, her expertise on Medicare, if I'm the one who fights with the government lawyer a little bit more. Or we help write the briefs, or we just work as a team. It just gives nonprofits a lot more reach because we have the person power to assist. And then I think the ripple effects on repeat players, once they see you enough, you can make change. So, for example, the ACLU of Louisiana does a great job in bringing litigation within Louisiana again and again against police departments for excessive force, and you start seeing change on the ground. And then just enhancing the capabilities of our partners and all, and that's our true goal, is to help facilitate these outcomes for these excellent lawyers and work together and just as a team. So those are kind of the things. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about it a little bit more. And we do have all of our pro bono and community impact exploits on our LinkedIn page at WS Gives if anyone wants to check it out. So thanks again for listening to me one more time.
Thank you all so much. Matt, do we have time for any questions from the audience?
By my count, we do.
Okay, great. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand, and Jeff will come and bring the microphone to you.
Great. Can everyone hear me on this mic? Hi, everyone. Good to see you. I'm Jeff Wiseman, by the way. I'll just take a moment to say hi and thank you all. Toby, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Toby Edelman. I'm with the Center for Medicare Advocacy. And I have a question for Afton, but first, I want to thank you and Congressman Doggett for your absolutely brilliant and effective advocacy over the years. And I would say especially during the COVID pandemic, And in the last months, as you've done so much to try to strengthen and improve the nursing home staffing standard rule, so thank you. I can't thank you enough. So here's my question. Now that CMS issued the rule just 2 days ago, we do have to read it, but what are your next steps in Congress about the rule, try to protect it and strengthen it? And do you have any suggestions for what advocates like us can be doing to strengthen enforcement of the rule and to try to ensure that all nursing homes have enough staff to provide good care to residents?
Yeah, thank you, Toby, and thank you for all of your incredible work. Over the years, I've heavily relied on you and SEIU and AFSCME and Consumer Voice and so many others in this space, Justice and Aging, Eric Carlson, although, yeah, I know he's moved to the administration, but he's been a wonderful ally as well, and we couldn't have done that work without all of you and all of the important research that you guys have offered as well. And I continue to find new factoids buried in all of these reports that I feed to the congressman. And that local reporter that he spoke to on Monday, I found a new stat to throw in there for him that we hadn't used before. So please keep generating all this great work. So one quote that I forgot to mention in my remarks that I'll just throw out right now. Nancy Pelosi once introduced my boss as the decidedly, determinedly, doggedly dissatisfied congressman from Austin. And I thought it was the most beautiful and apt description of this man and of me. And we very much... we don't really celebrate the victories. We're not great at that. We're a little too cynical, but we very much like to just keep moving on to the next thing. And so for us, looking at this rule, there were some modest improvements that were made. That's a direct quote from his quote. We were happy to see that. It's far beneath what we called for, what we know is needed, and we know we have to keep working on this. And so first, you mentioned protect. That's right. This year, we're definitely going to be fighting in Congress to protect it. We know that there will definitely be a CRA vote in the House on this. That's just certain. They anticipated. We did an anticipatory markup of this just a month ago. And so we know that's coming probably very, very soon. I would imagine right when they get back next week. I could not be surprised if it came that quickly. So we know that's going to happen. We know as we have fights over government funding again that we're going to have to watch out for riders that would prevent the rule from taking effect. We're going to have to continuously fight against any efforts to delay or tweak it. Like, it's not just a wholesale, let's stop it. There's also all the little ways they could modify what is already a very modest rule. They'll try and weaken it even further as one of the strategies. So we're going to definitely be playing some defense on the Hill. And, he'll continue to lead in those fights. But we also have to keep fighting for more because we can't give up on what the ultimate goal is, which is making sure that every single nursing home resident actually receives all of the care that they need, that they have the genuine quality outcomes and the safety that they deserve, and that the workers are getting the wages that they deserve. They're getting time off to be with their families and to recuperate. They're getting their own sick leave to take care of themselves and their family members. We're gonna have to keep fighting to make sure that these are dignified jobs that people will want. And that's a lot of different things. That looks like that's a lot of different bills we're going to be fighting for. That's more administrative advocacy that we're going to be fighting for. We also have to do it for all workers, not just our care workers. We've got the PRO Act, we've got the Family Act, we've got all these great things that we need to accomplish. It does not stop here. It's also not just about staffing standards. There are other ways the nursing home industry needs to be reformed and held accountable. And thankfully, this rule included some really great stuff on doing better data collection, doing more to examine private equity's role within the nursing home industry. There are separate rulemakings that have been going on related to private equity and healthcare. This is such a critical piece that we're going to keep working on. And we know know lots of academics have taken an interest in this and are producing some great research. So lots of important work to continue, and we definitely maintain all of our fire. We need all of you to do the same.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
We can take a remote question, Jeff.
Oh, sure.
If
Why don't we
mind.
do a remote question first, and then we'll have one more here.
Only because this is an eternal Medicare hot topic, so we want to know more. We're going to put Melissa on the spot and ask, where do you see oral health advocacy developing in coming years? You had a little bit of a win with the medically necessary. What next?
Sure. So, well, continuing to build on the medically necessary effort is going to be extremely important, especially over the next fairly short amount of time. We know that this administration is committed to this issue. We know that they are trying to move it forward, and so we are expecting to see potentially some additional conditions covered in this coming year, or this year, I guess, the proposed Medicare physician fee schedule. So there will be work around that. There's also needs to be a lot of work in making sure that the coverage that exists is implemented, that the contractors that are processing claims understand what they're supposed to be doing, that the providers that are theoretically seeing these patients both on the medical and the dental side know about this coverage and are working through the system, and that beneficiaries know about it too. So there's a lot to be done in just making sure that change works. Hopefully we will have the opportunity to continue to expand on that and to identify areas where there are additional sort of clinical scenarios where it will apply, but we know that is very stringent in terms of what the administration can do on its own. So where we're going from here is to look through this election cycle and into the next Congress, thinking about how do we keep the momentum that we've had and ensuring that, we saw that polling slide earlier, people care about this issue. People have been vocally supporting Medicare, dental, and vision and hearing coverage in a way that hasn't happened before. And so it's important to keep that on the table and working with members to advance it. We have really strong champions in the House. Unfortunately, many of our Senate champions are retiring, so that's going to be an important part of the work over the next year as well, is identifying new Senate champions and helping them and working with them and partnering with them and bringing them into our coalitions. So that's the high level of it, though there's a lot more we can do, and I'm happy to talk to anybody else about it in more depth at another time.
Thank you, Melissa. Was there a question over here? Yes? All right. Making my way to give you the microphone, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, I'm Dan Adcock with the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, and my question's for Afton. Afton, by the way, excellent PowerPoint presentation, and I think that it's underappreciated how much the personal, building personal relationships in person and being on the Hill. And I think many people, especially in our community, have kind of got out of that practice since COVID of doing that. So I think that's an excellent suggestion. But what I was going to mention is that in addition to what your suggestions were to us, what all we can do for you and your boss. And that is that, I know, at least speaking for the National Committee on both the political side and on the official side, that we're there. We are there in terms of doing teletown halls, or even going down to Austin and doing events with your boss or with you in person, as experts on some of these policies. And also point to my colleague Ann Montgomery here in the audience, who's been really been on top, a real leader in the advocacy community on the nursing home standard regs. So anything we can do for you or your boss, and I think that, not speaking for the other organizations represented in the room, but I would think based on their tax status, they might be able to do the same thing as well. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And I work the private side as well, so if you ever need to reach me. But, for us, don't tell my boss that I said this, but it's actually supporting our friends in Congress as well. Like, thankfully, my boss is in a very safe seat. He's our primary is over. We didn't have much of a primary this cycle, which is great. And so for us, it gives us a lot of space to just stay DC focused and keep working on all of these issues. But we need a lot of our friends to survive as well. It's for us to please give us a gavel back. But I also say this sort of, on the federal side as well, in terms of, this was something I reiterated a lot when we unveiled our big prescription drug bill several years ago, the Medicare Negotiation and Competitive Licensing Act. This was a really phenomenal bill. It was massive. It was total system changing, had a huge impact. A lot of folks really put themselves out there politically by signing on to this bill and fighting for it. We had a lot of vulnerable members that, pharmaceutical industry was all out attacking them. Also, the pharma-funded disease advocacy groups came out and attack, and it created a lot of problems for them. And so that's when I talk about arming your allies. We did a lot to try and support them, but I also kept encouraging all of our consumer advocacy organizations that helped us, write the bill and were endorsers and big supporters of it. I need you guys to have their back. I need you guys all over social media. I need you sharing in your newsletters so that their constituents know and they feel supported and that they really have all of this. And similarly on the nursing home staffing standards, I was telling folks when they were like, we want to thank your boss. I was like, thank you. Please do. We always like the thanks. But also, please thank everybody else that got on all of our letters and all of the vulnerable folks that really, the nursing home industry is going to be targeting them because they know it's not worth targeting Lloyd Doggett. They're not going to get anywhere. But if they start targeting our frontliners, they might actually be in trouble. And so please remember to thank everybody, not just the leaders, though we like the thanks too.
Please join me in thanking our panel again for a wonderful presentation. Thank you guys so much.
Such great tips from all the different places where we can advocate, and the reminder to go see people in person. And thank you so much. So now we're going to have our first break. And we'll reconvene to talk more about the fact that this is a National Caregiver Initiative time and to talk with and about caregiving. And we'll break now till 2:15. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. My name is Scott Perkins. I'm the Operations Director for the Center for Medicare Advocacy. I'd like to take a moment and thank our friends of the summit sponsors. The ALS Association, American Medical Rehabilitation Providers Association, Gerontological Society of America, Jonathan Kirkendall, psychotherapist, and the Jeffrey P. Austin Family Foundation. As reflected in the theme of this year's summit, today is dedicated to building awareness and momentum around various pathways to change, different approaches to making our world more equitable and just. Each pathway or approach to advocacy, whether it's education, grassroots organizing, direct services, legal assistance, administrative and congressional advocacy, litigation, and others, each of these pathways are critical in shifting public opinion and moving toward change. At times, we also see sudden, significant changes happen not as a result of any one pathway, but through the combined impact of all these pathways together, all of these approaches creating an ecosystem of change. President Johnson's decision to use the new Medicare and Medicaid program to mandate the desegregation of hospitals throughout the country suddenly created a significant shift in civil rights and health care in America. However, this sudden shift would not have happened without the long daily struggle for change and the hard work of the civil rights movement up until that point in 1965. I have experienced a similar sudden shift in my lifetime. Back in 2006, I ended up in an emergency room following an extreme sport accident. And to be clear, it was the accident that was extreme, not the sport. I had simply been ice skating down at Freedom Plaza and somehow managed to break my entire right leg from my ankle up to my kneecap. After about 8 hours in the ER, I was scheduled for surgery the next morning, and they were ready to admit me for the evening. My husband started to accompany me to my room when he was stopped and told, you can't go with us because visiting hours just ended and you're not family. He protested, saying that he was my partner and simply wanted to accompany me long enough to know I was safely in bed, say goodnight, and then he would gladly leave. The hospital responded by threatening to call security. Fast forward to 2015, and I end up again in an emergency room, this time in Miami, Florida. Those who work with me know that this is a recurring story. No, but it wasn't ice skating in Miami. However, this time, due to the Obama administration's requirement that all hospitals receiving Medicaid and Medicare funding grant visitation and decision rights to same-sex couples, made a huge difference. This time, as they wheeled me into the ER, the nurse asked, that guy who came in with you, is he your husband? I mean, are you legally married? I said, yes, he is, and yes, we are. And she smiled and said, oh, that is great. That means he can deal with the paperwork and the insurance details. And you and I are just going to focus on what's going on with your health right now. For me and my husband, that shift was enormous. And it was a sudden change for us, but one that resulted from long and ongoing fight for change involving years of countless advocates, allies, family members, lawsuits, protests, all of this pushing for justice and all creating a larger ecosystem within which this change happened. It can be daunting to fight the long fight for meaningful change, step after step and day after day. So as we continue to explore pathways to change, I hope we remember that each step we take toward justice and equity, individually and as a community, is part of a larger ecosystem that may, even without our knowing it, become a springboard for sudden change. This month is Care Worker Recognition Month. And auspiciously, HHS has determined this week is HHS's Care Week. So before we move on with our discussion of pathways to change by spotlighting the critical role of care workers, I would like to take a moment and thank our networking sponsor, the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. All of our sponsors, we're deeply grateful for your help in making this summit happen. But thanking the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation gives me the chance to pivot to introducing Regina Bly, Chief Program and Policy Officer at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. And I'm very excited to say also one of the Center for Medicare Advocacy's 4 newest board members.
Thank you so much, Scott. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here today. So first, for those who need a visual description, I'm gonna go ahead and give that for you now. I'm a black woman with brownish, I don't know what color my locks are, long curly locks. I'm wearing a black top and pants with a maroon color. I'm in a green and black wheelchair. For some of you, it kind of looks like the Brazil colors. I just moved back to Texas. It could be my John Deere that I'm riding. I don't know. But I am in my mid-40s. Yeah, I said that out loud. And so, again, I'm so glad to be here. And I have paralysis. I have quadriplegia, C6, C7. I've had paralysis now since the age of 10. And it was all due to the fact that I went to a slumber party and I was shot in the neck with a rifle just for showing up. And it took a long time to be able to tell people that story because I was getting judged all the time. Like, what were you doing to get shot? I mean, I was watching TV. I wasn't doing much. And so then people thought that I was raised in a bad home because I lived and I experienced gun violence, and it took me a while to understand what that meant, even at the age of 10. And I was injured before the ADA, before that there were great organizations like these to be able to help us understand how to process things, how to make sure we understand how to be independent. And so I'm always thrilled and honored when people ask me to speak or to be a part of the conversation, like being a board member, so that we can have these conversations. And it's always important when you're including people that come from rural areas and diverse populations, like a black girl from the middle of nowhere now can have access to information when that couldn't happen in the 80s. And so I want to thank this organization for being a supporter of the Christopher and Dana Reed Foundation for so many years, oversee the National Paralysis Resource Center, which we're the only federally funded organization that provides resources to individuals with paralysis, their caregivers, and their family members who just want to understand how to maintain and make their safe space. And then I'm gonna do this moment. Scott, if you don't mind, will you hold my iPad? I feel like it's that moment when a girl is about to fight. Hold my earrings. I fidget too much, and I don't need it. I think I'm in a safe space, right? I'm not going to go from notes. I'm just going to wing it. So my colleague in the back said, make sure you mention advocacy. So I want to say that our team is here from the DC office. We have our policy team. Raise your hands or do whip. In the back is Gerard. So we have Angel, Kim, Tyree, and Gerard. They're our advocacy public policy team. If you ever need any kind of assistance when it comes to disabilities, people, older age, whatever it is, we are your folks. We are in the trenches to be able to help everyone try to have the most independent life. And so I have the best team that is a part of our organization to be able to help out in that area. So I want to real quickly say why I'm extremely excited. I get to introduce Athena Jones. I saw her speak at the White House presentation recently, and I almost fell out my chair. I was like, this woman is inspiring me in so many ways, and I don't even like to use the word inspiring, so she is motivating me in so many ways because caregiving isn't the topic that people like to talk about. And at best, caregiving doesn't include dignity. And when people talk about that, they don't know what that means. So I'll give you a quick example of what caregiving means, what home care means, and dignity isn't included. It means that people that you love give the best of themselves so that people like myself can be present. And I want to say that one more time. The people that you love give the best of themselves so that people like myself can be present. And they don't know what that means. Sometimes that's waking up early in the morning to help people get dressed. And that happened with my partner, Jay. We left Houston at 4 o'clock in the morning to make it here, and he was exhausted and tired. But he knew that the purpose of me being here was so important, he allowed for me to do it. And it's all free. Well, he gets to see me all the time, so that's the benefit, but it was all free. And so it shouldn't have to be that way. My partner shouldn't also be my caregiver. That's where the dignity is out. There's no pay for him. There's no time clock for him. It happens when it happens. And negotiations sometimes are okay because he's a really chill dude, but there are other times when I see him perplexed and he says, oh no, this isn't going to happen. And I know, okay, well, I won't be doing this. And these are the conversations we shouldn't have. But Athena is an advocate that everyone should know about because she's breaking down barriers. She's helping people understand that there is a way to have dignity when it comes to caregiving. She said something important that I want to bring out today. And she said, when you care about something, you invest in it. When you care about something, you invest in it. And so that's the reason why the Reed Foundation is with you all the time because of the work that y'all do. We call you all the time with complicated cases and complicated issues that need to be fixed, and y'all haven't hung up on us yet. That's the important thing. You haven't hung up on us. Instead, y'all have given us your legal brilliance when it comes to people losing their benefits or fighting to get prescriptions that won't be covered, or they're thinking Medicare would cover home health care, all those things. Y'all have helped us with that. And for that reason, we care about y'all, so we invest. We are here today. We try to sponsor as often as we can. We host these information webinars as often as possible because Medicare is so easy for you to understand. You got to have webinars all the time to just make sure you know what you know. And so we have this wonderful partnership, and it's all because of your fearless leader, Judy, who has the faith in her team to transition over to create a new pathway for her brilliance to be able to continue on. I am extremely proud to be here, to be a part of this conversation, to introduce my blurred sister that I just now found about to speak today, because she's going to talk about the other side of what healthcare, what caregiving looks like. And I hope that more people join us in this effort to be able to make sure that we have a process forward, because the system right now is broken. And all of these workers are making it easy for people to say there's nothing wrong with it, but it is wrong. And we got to figure out how to make it right. And so when you listen to this beautiful woman right now, you should be motivated to know that there's a pathway forward. Thank you all. Thank you. Oh, and I'll take that back if you like.
I want to give it up one more time for my blurred sister. All right now. So I've had quite the tour for the last few weeks, but I've been honored to be in this space. You know, when we talk about care, oftentimes, and especially when we talk about care within like the disability field, you know, oftentimes, oh, you work in the disability field. Look at you. How nice is that? It's like looking at a wet puppy, little tiny Yorkies in a cup. And the reality is that's not dignity. I know what it's like. You know, they talk to me about like, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? Well, what about your origin story? So I'm like, got it. Because I'm a nerd, I got an origin story. I know what it's like. So we used to live in Europe. And when we came to the United States, I ended up in an area that didn't look like me. They didn't talk like me. I did not fit in. I had a blue passport, but I still grew up in an area where it was very different than where I went. And so I learned two things. I learned that I needed to get rid of my accent, and as a child, I wasn't able to comprehend or process what racism was, but I knew whatever they were saying, they had a problem with something I had zero control over. So when we talk about care, people are in situations they have no control over. Birth injuries, vaccination industry, all these different type of things that happens to people, and you have no control over it. But when you have someone who comes into the home and says, okay, your arms and legs, I'll be your arms and legs. If you need a voice, no problem. I'll listen intently and learn your language, and then I'll be able to be your voice. Not just your voice, the echo of who you are. Because you have your own voice. I'm there to support it. And so when we walk into the rooms of care and caregiving, it's about empowering. It's about empowerment. It's about your position to be able to support someone who needs. And so people always talk about, oh, what you do is wonderful. Well, look at that. But the reality is that many home care workers and care workers do it because they have to. You know that your family member needs you. And so what do you sacrifice? You sacrifice your life because of love. And so you're loved into a situation. Whether or not that was your destiny, whether or not you have a master's degree, whether or not you have a PhD, it doesn't matter. You are then loved into a situation because you want to support the person you love. You want to be able to fill in the gap as the ambassador because they need that support. But then you work in a system where home care workers can't even get a day off. We work in a system where home care workers can't even afford to be sick. But yet during the pandemic, who continued to work? Caregivers. Who continued to wake up every day to do their job? Caregivers. Why? Because we had to. Because if I didn't do my job, someone else couldn't get out of bed. someone else couldn't even roll over to look at a television. But how is that possible if we're talking about a program where we're supposed to be supporting people, but yet in the United States, we can't feel supported? Okay, it's okay. We'll walk through this together. We can't feel supported because we can't get days off. Home care workers are working 20, 30 years, and then when they stop working, is there a 401k available? No. Is there an opportunity for them to retire without Social Security? No. But yet we want to say, look at you. Good job, home care worker. You did a wonderful job. Look at you taking care of your brother. Look at you. But what did Regina say? If you find it important enough, you invest in it. And so finally we have an administration that even says now, guess what? Home care workers, we're here, woo-woo, Biden, we're right here. We're right here. That wasn't the language before. It wasn't until 2010 that home care workers transitioned from being glorified babysitters to now being covered under the National Labor Relations. 2010. All this time, generations of women of color, of women who continue to push this forward. And why? There's a disparity in the system. There's an intentional disparity in the system. Because we talk about caring, but we only invest in what we care. So what about education? Are we caring for education? We invest in for what we care for. Are we caring about home care workers? We invest in what we care for. Are we talking about services that support the humanity of our system? We're talking about humanity. Opportunity to be able to get sick and not have to end up with thousands of dollars or trying to figure out Medicare Part A, Medicare Part B, C, the advanced Medicare, and line 4, line C. It's intentional. Because if people don't know, then they're like, well, I'll just sit with the system that I have because trying to fight the big system, how am I going to do that? So the reality is that if we want to be able to change the system, we have to do it. Not we, right? You have to do it, right? Because we talk about how we're tired of this. We're tired of that. Great. You throw a couple dollars at it, I've done my service. Is that it? We have to then move into these situations where we position ourselves to fill in the gap. That's your job, to fill in the gap, to walk the walk and not just say, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Tomorrow's not promised for any of us. We are the ones, if we talk about making a change and being the policy of change, we are the change. You are the change. And so what are you going to do? What are you going to do to make the system better so that home care workers can get a day off? So that the education system can get a day off? So the Medicare system doesn't look like a strange tax return? Like, when is that going to happen? You have to make it happen. You are in the position to make that happen. It's not just coming to a conference and sitting pretty with all your fabulosity. Hello, everybody, you do look fabulous. Fabulous. But it's about changing the system. And so I'm going to leave with you with this. Martin Luther King said, right? If you can't fly, then you run. If you can't run, I'm going to change it, then you walk. If you can't walk, then you roll. If you can't roll, then you crawl. Because the reality is generations are depending on the legacy that you create today. You will be the history makers. But if you sit back, the people years from now will be fighting the same exact fight you said you're trying to make a change over. Because you didn't do your job. It is your job to make that change. It is your job to be more than just lip service. It is your job to say, you know what? Family, we're going to go out and vote. We realize that this is a big deal. We need to get to the polls. That's what we need to do. That's how we make a difference in the change. Because we want this to be more than just today. This is about generational change. And in order for that to happen, you are the start of the generation. All right? All right. All right. Amen, everybody. You guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Athena. Thank you, Regina. Now, I'm happy to introduce my friends and colleagues, Kathy Holt, the Associate Director at the Center for Medicare Advocacy, and Allie Beers, our Litigation Director.
Thank you, Scott. I was just saying to Melanie at my table, whose idea was it to put two lawyers after that? That was fabulous. Thank you so much. And we're going to probably not be quite as energetic as that was, but that was fabulous. I'm Kathy Holt. This is Allie Bears, and we call the Center for Medicare Advocacy home. But we know we are a stronger community because of our community that is here with us today. And we'd like to thank our community sponsors, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, Powers Law, thank you, Peter, the PAN Foundation, and the Graham Healthcare Group. Your support makes us all stronger. We are going to talk today about advancing access to Medicare-covered home health care through direct assistance. Several years ago, before Katherine Johnson became the lead plaintiff in our home health aid court case, Katherine contacted us to help her to keep her home health care services in place. So Katherine and I are going to tell you about those efforts, and then Allie will further discuss home health services and our home health aid court case. But first, it's my privilege and my honor to introduce you to Katherine Johnson.
My name is Katherine Johnson, and I reside in Springfield, Missouri with my husband. I have many challenges of daily living. I'm in a power chair and have become quadriplegic, I'll say in the last 10 years. I was diagnosed with MS in 1997. I was 32 years old, and it was relapsing remitting. It has progressed to secondary progressive. Before I contacted the Center for Medicare Advocacy, I was definitely challenged with the companies with which I was dealing. The home care specifically contacted me at one point and said, "We're being asked about you being still needing services, primarily because I'm a chronic patient and I never improved." And so they did decline me so that I had to leave the company, and I felt very misled about the information that they wanted me to sign. And they told me that the signing of this paper was simply because they were concerned about being audited. When I was discharged from them, then they never let me be part of the company anymore. This is that spot where I lost my shower aids. I did go through with Kathy's assistance to talk to a judge, an appeals judge, back in 2020. And as Kathy spoke with him, he started asking what the different benefits I should be receiving that I had lost. And so Kathy took the opportunity to explain the shower aids and the home health care not providing the ongoing services such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, the shower aid. And as that judge I felt surprised that I wasn't getting those services anymore. He started asking Kathy all the different things that I should qualify for. And Kathy took the opportunity to list item by item by item. And he was very interested and took down the information about all that I should receive. And it was very detailed. That document has assisted me with the next company that I started with, and they have been wonderful. And they had that sheet of paper, and they're providing me with physical therapy twice a week. And the nurse that I have once a month, and occupational therapy, and my power chair being adjusted as needed. And the one thing I don't get, like I said, is the shower aid, and it would save us a lot of money. And at being a chronic MS patient, there's a lot of doctors and products that I need to use that the company would not provide for me. So the judge's information has been so helpful for me, life-changing. The physical therapy that I have been receiving I've been using them now for almost 2 years. And my strength and ability and stretching, the things that happen when he's here have been, in fact, I have them this afternoon, and that's always a great day for me. I get stretched, the strength that I'm working on. Actually, this was pretty cool. Last visit last week, he had me standing up and getting that weight going into my legs. And that's, he has really explained how that's keeping those bones healthy. And of course, my muscles. And the improvement has been amazing. And I think everybody with MS and ALS and the Parkinson's, what a huge difference that could make for everyone if they would just do that maintenance training. It's, like I said, it's been amazing for me. I'm stronger and I'm more comfortable with this. Arms and legs could be all bound up, and I'm so loosened up since then. So see me sneaking in a little bit of my exercise here. The help that I may not really receive is something that I can work on so that all the other MS patients throughout the country, so that's a lot, and I could be the one helping them, and I am all on board to do that. And knowing that it's going to help so many people, I'm so thankful I'm on board.
I know Catherine is with us from home with her husband, Greg. Thank you both for your tireless positivity and your advocacy. To give some additional context to Catherine's case, the home health agency that discharged Catherine had provided her with Medicare-covered services for many years, skilled services, plus 2 aides 3 times a week. But within months after a merger with a larger corporation and a change in local management for her home health agency, she was discharged by the home health agency. They said in writing that Catherine no longer met Medicare criteria because she didn't need any assistance leaving her home. She didn't need a device to leave her home. It wasn't a taxing effort for her to leave her home, and she didn't need skilled services. But on the kind of QT, the agency staff told her that the reason she was being discharged was her longevity with that particular agency, and they were concerned about having Medicare audits, so they wanted to get her off of their services. Along with her doctors, we tried to prevent her discharge, keep her services in place, those services that she really needed as she described. But the Medicare contractors agreed with the home health agency that she didn't meet Medicare criteria. So about 4 months later, we had, as she mentioned, a hearing on her case before an administrative law judge. She received a fully favorable decision from the administrative law judge, who said she was wrongfully discharged from her home health agency and that she did indeed need all of the services that she qualified for, both skilled services and aid services. The agency wouldn't take her back. The judge did not have the authorization to put services back in place for her with that agency. And the agency suffered no consequences for having discharged her. Fortunately, as she mentioned, with the judge's decision, in that same month that she got the judge's decision, she started with a new home health care agency that she's been with now for the last 3 years. And that agency relies, at least in part, on the judge's decision that she should continue to have those needs. That's why it was so important in our advocacy to make sure that the decision was as detailed as possible. However, this home health agency that she's with right now appears to be the last home health agency in the Springfield, Missouri area that is even assessing patients who are not improving. Out of about 12 certified home health agencies, Medicare certified home health agencies in her area, most agencies are not even allowing people to get a foot in the door if they are not improving. This particular agency and its clinical director are highly committed to maintenance services. And even though the Johnsons pay about $10,000 out of pocket for aid services every year, those services that should be included in the Medicare capitated reimbursement, the agency, just in providing the skilled services, is extremely rare. So home health agencies, with all due respect, are like animals in the wild. They instinctively respond, react, and adapt to the environment around them. And CMS has created an environment including at least 3 obstacles for serving patients like Catherine with longer-term and chronic conditions. The first obstacle is the payment system that calculates more favorable reimbursement for people who have short-term post-acute care needs. The second obstacle are ill-informed audit systems that target home health agencies who are serving longer-term patients, and these audits often find that services for someone who has greater than average resource needs are unnecessary or even fraudulent. And the third obstacle is quality measures and value-based programs that contain only criteria that require patients to improve and to be discharged quickly from services. Unfortunately, we hear versions of Catherine's experience repeated often. People who are desperately trying to get some Medicare-covered home health care, let alone the average of 5 hours a day of nursing and aides, as well as the unlimited recertification periods that the Medicare law promises. Most of the people we hear from aren't able to keep services in place for more than a few months, and many people, as I mentioned, can't get a foot in the door for an assessment because an increasing number of agencies will only serve people who are improving. So Medicare law, regulations, and policies all promise home health coverage that now barely exists in practice for people with chronic and longer-term conditions. We continue to work with Medicare beneficiaries, their families, providers, other advocates and partners in coalition, CMS, the administration, Congress, academia, media, and the courts
to remove these discriminatory obstacles to covered home health care for people who are living with chronic and longer-term conditions. In a program that serves 66 million beneficiaries, standardization is necessary, but the answer can't be one size fits all. It can't be enough for CMS to call it good when practices work for 40 or 50 million people with short-term post-acute care needs, and the remainder who need more services for longer are left to their own devices or they're forced to go without. And now Allie will share more information about home health care and our home health litigation.
Thanks, Kathy. So as you heard Catherine Johnson explain in the video, even after all the work that Kathy did with her and having the ALJ hearing, she was not able to restore her home health aid services. Now, if you look at the Medicare law as it's written, the home health benefit does cover aids, and that's to provide hands-on personal care for services like bathing, grooming, dressing, repositioning, as long as the person is otherwise qualified for home health services under Medicare. What does that mean, to be otherwise qualified? Just as an oversimplification, it's basically two things: that you meet the so-called homebound benefit. Doesn't mean you literally can't leave the home, but basically that it requires a taxing effort, and also that you have a need for some form of skilled care. That could be nursing, that could be physical or occupational therapy. And if you meet those criteria and have that ongoing need, Congress mandated coverage for up to 28 to 35 hours per week of home health aid care. It's not a coincidence that those numbers, 28, 35, are divisible by 7. The idea was to provide people the care they might need, for example, in the morning, each day in the morning, to get out of bed, get ready for the day, and then reverse the process at the end of the day. Bathing and grooming are, of course, critical to help prevent infection. Help with walking helps prevent falls. Repositioning helps prevent wounds or allows wounds to heal. So these services are key to helping people remain in their home, in the community, and out of hospitals and nursing homes. But the reality is that people can't access this benefit. And the number of aid visits per 60-day episode of home health care, for example, has declined by 90% since 1998. So this is not a new problem. There's been a lot of talk about pandemic-related workforce issues, but the decline in the provision of aids under Medicare has been persistent for over 20 years. And that 90% decline you can see in the graph that MedPAC, I believe, has put out. It's just been this slanted line down. As a result, many beneficiaries, especially those with significant chronic conditions like the conditions that Catherine Johnson mentioned, Parkinson's, paralysis, multiple sclerosis, the effects of stroke, ALS, or other conditions that are expected to persist and not to improve, they cannot get the types, the amounts, or the duration of aid services that they require and that they're eligible to receive coverage for under Medicare. So after many years of advocacy with CMS, the Medicare agency, on home health and working with beneficiaries like Catherine, without making progress on the aid issue specifically, the Center for Medicare Advocacy filed a class action lawsuit against Medicare in the fall of 2022, and the caption of the case is Catherine Johnson versus Javier Becerra in his official capacity as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And the lawsuit claims that by impeding the accessibility and coverage of home health aid services for people with chronic disabilities, Medicare is violating both the Medicare statute and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but first just a minute about the plaintiffs. Catherine, who you saw in the video, is the lead named plaintiff. There's another individual plaintiff who I believe is watching from Michigan today, Cara Bennell. Hello, Cara, if you're watching. Cara also has quadriplegia and uses a wheelchair for mobility. And there are also 2 organizational plaintiffs, national nonprofits, the National MS Society and Team Gleason, which advocates for people with ALS. And we thank you to our plaintiffs, to the plaintiffs in all of our cases, really, for lending their stories and their advocacy, putting themselves out there to try to make Medicare better for all. To explain a little bit about the disability discrimination claim, both of the individual plaintiffs, Catherine, who you saw, and Kara, have been admitted to the hospital when they did not receive sufficient home health aid services. Another named plaintiff, who sadly passed away last year, actually had to go into a nursing home for a while. And those are exactly the sort of institutional admissions that the Medicare home health aid benefit is meant to prevent, and that Medicare has a duty to avoid under the Supreme Court case of Olmstead versus LC. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Olmstead. 25 years ago in 1999, the Supreme Court held that unjustified segregation of disabled people in institutional care settings is itself a form of disability discrimination. It's one of the most important civil rights victories for people with disabilities. Advocates have made a lot of progress since Olmstead, since the case was decided, but probably a theme that you will likely hear during the anniversary celebrations this year is how much more work there is still left to do. Many people with significant disabilities still don't have the opportunity to live and fully participate in the community. But the principle of Olmstead is established in the law. People with disabilities, like Catherine Johnson, have a right to an appropriate care environment. And for Catherine and for Kara, that means having meaningful access to home health aid that Medicare authorizes by law, when that allows them to remain in their homes. So the case, Johnson versus Becerra, unfortunately, it was dismissed by a judge at the district level, at the district court level last year. It's now pending on appeal in the DC Court of Appeals. And that brings me to another important principle in our advocacy, which is that litigation is one tool in the toolbox. We continue to advocate on as many fronts as possible for the existing home health aid benefit to actually be enforced and implemented. And I'll just mention one example. We were pleased that CMS requested a request, they issued a request for information, RFI, in the Federal Register last year that was actually quite responsive to the issues raised in the Johnson versus Becerra litigation. It asked questions about the decline in utilization of home health aid services, particularly for people who it calls higher acuity, we might call people with significant disabilities. It asked about why doctors appear to be ordering fewer home health aid services, and gave us and others an opportunity to comment. So it was a good sign to see that CMS, or some people at CMS, are listening. We hope they will continue to listen and that they will ensure that the rights of Catherine Johnson and others with disabilities are honored.
And I would add to what Ali was saying about this incredible decline in home health aid services over the last 20 years of 90%. There's not been a change in the coverage laws. So there's really nothing to explain that as far as the law is concerned. There's no reason for that precipitous drop in services. Do we have time for questions? We don't have time for questions. Sorry. All right, thank you. I know we're running behind. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. People who devote their lives to making things better for other people are lucky if they can look back and see if they've made a difference, however small. Once in a while, someone comes along who makes an undeniable, profound, and tangible impact in a short period of time. Adi Barkan, who died last November, was one of those people who made an indelible impact during his too short life. We wanted to take a few moments to honor Adi and his life and his contribution to work that continues. We here at the Center for Medicare Advocacy had the honor of working and getting to know Adi during the last year of his life, and he and his colleagues at Be a Hero, the group he helped found, brought together organizations, many of whom had never worked together before, to pool our resources to confront the growing privatization of the Medicare program and the challenges faced by those enrolled in Medicare Advantage plans. We were able to feature a recording of Adi that he made for us at our summit last year, here, or not here, at the press club, but during our summit. We are about to watch 3 videos. I will introduce each of them. The first video is an excerpt from Adi's memorial, courtesy of Be a Hero. It offers just a glimpse of who Adi was and the way he lived his life, both before and after his diagnosis of ALS.
So my name's Adi Barkan. I'm the campaign director for Fed Up, which is our national campaign for a strong economy.
He's always been this way, just willing to really confront injustice and unfairness.
Let's give it up to all of you for being part of this movement for worker, racial justice, and economic justice.
He helped immigrant workers, members of Make the Road New York, recover millions of dollars in stolen wages. He helped draft and win paid sick day legislation in New York City that gave millions of workers the right to get sick without losing their job.
If you look at the programs that he's even started, like Fed Up or being such a part of local progress, it's always been about building this kind of world that we want to see.
Before Adi got sick, he had already made so much happen.
And then I took a plane that changed my life.
My next guest made headlines when he confronted a Republican senator on an airplane.
This is your moment to be an American hero. Be a Hero is a new campaign that we launched this week to urge people to stand up, tell their stories, confront the elected officials.
When we decided to form the Be a Hero PAC, if they voted for the tax bill, if they voted to cut health care for people like Adi, we would replace them.
In the first few years of Be a Hero, we drove across the country during the midterm elections, fought to stop Kavanaugh, and testified in front of Congress in support of Medicare for all. Our time on this earth is the most precious resource we have.
Right after Medicare for all, we're like, our proposal is we're going to invite every single one of the presidential candidates to come speak with Adi.
Mr. Vice President.
How you doing? Adi, how are you, pal?
The invitation that Adi gave to Senator Flake in that plane, Be a Hero, is an invitation that then he extended to everyone.
One of the things we're trying to capture are people's personal stories and then use Adi's platform to lift those up.
I've been incredibly frustrated by the lack of response from Peter Roskam.
He has never once in the past 2 years had a town hall for his constituents.
Someone who is literally spending the last days of his life advocating for health care just makes me feel like I have to do more.
It's the time to step up.
Be a hero and vote no! Be a hero and vote no!
I have stage 4 colon cancer, so I'm in there fighting the fight for everybody. I'm like Adi, I just fight.
And that's the beauty of democracy, that together we can be more than the sum of our parts, and we can be more than our individual selves.
This next video features Adi's dear friend and colleague Carmen Rhodes, program director at Be a Hero. Carmen had a long history of work in the labor movement, including at AFL-CIO and SCIU, before she came to Be a Hero, where she oversees programs and organizing operations. In addition to her collaborative and strategic acumen, we will be forever touched by the memory of our many Zoom calls during which Carmen thoughtfully and tenderly augmented and sometimes replaced Adi's speech-generating device to maximize his ability to contribute and to lead discussions. Carmen couldn't make the trip all the way from California today, but she recorded some remarks for us and to discuss Adi and Be a Hero's work.
Good afternoon. My name is Carmen Rhodes, and I'm the program director at Be a Hero. Be a Hero is a national healthcare justice organization founded by my friend and co-conspirator Adi Barkan. It is an honor to speak to you all today. I'm grateful to the Center for Medicare Advocacy for your incredible and compassionate work. Before I talk about Adi, I wanted to start by thanking Judy Stein David Lipschutz, and Kathy Holt for welcoming Be a Hero with open arms. We at Be a Hero are babies to the complicated world of Medicare and long-term care policy, and you have spent countless hours helping us to understand what could be possible and where it's most important for us to focus our activism. And I greatly appreciate your invitation to say a few words in honor of Adi. As many of you know and see from the video you just watched, Adi was a relentless advocate for justice of all forms. I first met Adi in 2014 when he moved to Santa Barbara for his wife Rachel's new job at the university. We were introduced by mutual friends and both had fulfilling national jobs, him at the Center for Popular Democracy and me at the National AFL-CIO. We became fast friends and quickly started scheming together. One of Adi's favorite words was scheming, about how to forge tighter partnerships between labor unions and community organizations in places like Dallas, Texas. Over the years, the scheming continued from a mini campaign we ran together to get our local congressman officially signed on to Medicare for All, to eventually me coming to work with him here at Be a Hero. In 2015, when I was pregnant with my oldest son, Adi organized a karaoke night with all of our friends here in Santa Barbara. So there we all were, singing along to Baby One More Time by Britney Spears, Baby by Justin Bieber, Ice Ice Baby by the one and only Vanilla Ice, and I finally figured out that Adi had secretly instructed everyone to sing a song that had baby in it. It was so funny. Most of you will remember him as an effective activist, but he was also funny as all get out. Adi was diagnosed with ALS 4 weeks before Donald Trump was elected president in 2016. By fall of 2019, ALS had nearly completely paralyzed him, and he made the difficult decision to have a tracheotomy and live on a ventilator to extend his life. I came to work officially with Adi and the Be a Hero team in January of 2020, a couple months before the pandemic started and only a few months after the life-saving and also life-changing trach operation. And for nearly 4 years, I walked over to Adi's house and worked from there. Our families and kids were in a bubble together with his caregiving team. I think we felt less lonely than most. We were still able to get together. We could commiserate and complain and laugh about our crazy kids, how hard marriage can be, and how joyful too. And he was one of my best friends and my boss. Adi loves strategizing about how best to advocate, organize, and win policy. We'd sit next to each other and both get on Zoom calls so that I could help him participate as fully as possible. One day in between calls, Adi told me that while it could be really hard to live in a paralyzed body, he didn't feel like he was dying anymore. He felt like he would live for at least another 10 years. He embraced his life and often told all of us how grateful he was for the time he had. Because I spent so much time with him, sometimes I helped with his care. I learned how to help with suctioning his lungs through the trach, feed him through his G-tube, how to communicate when his eye gaze wasn't working, and so much more. Helping him participate fully in this work with all of you has been one of the greatest joys of my life, with memories I will treasure for time well spent. After his ALS diagnosis, Adi sued his insurance company to get the care he needed, and luckily was able to secure an agreement that would pay for his home care. The amazing team that cared for him was a game changer. They allowed Adi and Rachel to be husband and wife again, for him to be a dad to Carl and Willow, and to be able to do meaningful work with the Be a Hero crew. For Adi and for all of us who were close to him, we saw firsthand the power of caregiving, and Adi became one of the leading voices and why we all deserve home care when we need it, and why caregivers deserve to make great wages and benefits. Everyone should have the opportunity to choose what Adi had, to live in their homes surrounded by loved ones with a well-paid, stable, and reliable team of caregivers. Adi's passion for expanding home care led us to find the Center for Medicare Advocacy. He had read an article about the efforts to force HHS to deliver on the home care rights that are already on the books for certain kinds of Medicare beneficiaries. And then to our pleasant surprise, we found that CMA was also working on another issue that we were starting to understand, that our cherished public benefit of Medicare is being taken over by insurance corporations offering Medicare Advantage plans. As someone who is well known in the Medicare for All world, Adi started telling everyone that without intervention, we will end up with Medicare Advantage for all. We have been in close relationship with CMA ever since, working to expose the problems with massive overpayments to insurance corporations, exposing and lifting up the horrific stories of Medicare beneficiaries who have been denied care by faceless corporations, and laying out a vision that Medicare itself can be great if we work together to make it so. I think the reason Adi's story resonates with so many of us is because he made it easy to believe that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we all deserve health care, including home care. He loved democracy and humanity deeply, and his proposition about health care appealed to our deepest sense of being human. If we don't care for each other, then who are we? In the video today, you heard Adi say, "Our time on this earth is our most precious resource." He said it in the context of fighting with greedy health insurance corporations to get the care we deserve. Since his death, I have thought about it often, that in this country with untold wealth, we still have farm workers and care workers living in squalor, that our policy choices prioritize profit over healthcare. And I think about it in the context of my own time. How do I love deeply? How can I use my time to fight for the just world that is possible? Adi painted a picture of what could be. It's up to all of us to roll in his tracks and keep fighting to make it so. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen, for those moving words, and congratulations on very likely being the first person to cite Britney Spears, Justin Bieber, and Vanilla Ice at a Medicare-related conference. Our plan had not been to show yet another video, but we are here because our friend Alex Lawson, the Executive Director at Social Security Works, was held back west for work reasons and had planned to be here, but was able to record a video, I think probably from his hotel room in the last couple of days. Alex, what I plan to say about Alex in introducing him is that Ali earlier made a reference to the advocacy toolbox. Alex uses more tools in the proverbial advocacy toolbox than anyone else I know. In addition to policy chops and the ability to converse in wonky policy details with policymakers and others, among other things, he is a virtuoso of the soundbite, a master grassroots organizer, and willing to don various costumes to expose wrongdoing, including, for example, the Monopoly Man outfit to highlight corporate greed, and is willing to get arrested at congressional hearings when there are outrages to point out. In addition to getting to know Adi, Carmen, and the Be a Hero team, as well as a lot of other organizations that are doing this work, including some folks in this room, it has been a pleasure getting to know Alex better. I'll let Alex say a few words that would have been in person, but again, another video.
Thank you so much to Judy and David and everyone at the Center for Medicare Advocacy, both for the opportunity to speak today and for the work that you do every day. I'm Alex Lawson. I'm the Executive Director of Social Security Works, and we're proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with the organizations and activists in the room fighting against the privatization of Medicare. We know what that means for patients. We know it means deadly delays and denials. We know what that means for Medicare at large. It's a designed to bankrupt traditional Medicare and destroy traditional Medicare so that the corporate insurers have a stranglehold on everybody's health care. And when they achieve that market power, we know exactly what they do. Their bad acts continue up, people get harmed, people die, and a handful of people become billionaires or make billions more dollars to buy another golden yacht or whatever they do with their money. What we have found in the most recent past, so it's been a struggle to get attention on this, to get congressional action, to get the White House to focus on this. But recently, the corporate insurers have been so bad that these stories keep coming one after another and that is giving us an opening. And we were working sort of separately in our little areas. A lot of the folks in the room just doing great work. You know, some academics and policy experts working here, some people working directly with patients and people on Medicare, some people organizing both within Medicare, Medicare Advantage, and also just across the board with healthcare against corporate insurers, and some, you know, a mixture of all of them. But what really, with Adi and Be a Hero sort of bringing us together, we call it coalescing, because no one wanted to be a coalition. So now we're a coalescence of organizations. And what we can do is each organization, every activist can do their piece, and all together we're going to be so much more powerful than if everyone is just in their own lane doing their own piece. So by organizing our opposition, I think what Be a Hero, Adi, and what the Coalescence has done is we have gotten off of the back foot. We have gotten off of playing defense and are now playing offense. We're taking the fight to the insurers. In the rate notice fight, we fought them punch for punch, and we won. You know, it's not like we're winning. We haven't reversed Medicare Advantage just gobbling up traditional Medicare, but we've slowed it down, and we've proven that it can be reversed, and that is all because we're organized. So I always say, you know, the most impactful act that you can take is to get organized. And I think that is true for individuals and also for organizations, and the Coalescence proves that. You know, we had People's Action, Be a Hero, and others, Rose Roach, Labor for Single Payer, take over United Health's office and really shine a Klieg light directly on the villains in this story. And, you know, we were able to take that and through all of the different organizations, utilize it in all of these different lanes, on the Hill, in the media, with the administration, and just keep up this pressure. And by being organized and understanding that all of these tactics are critical, we're starting to reverse the destruction of traditional Medicare by the corporate insurers. And Social Security Works is so proud to be part of the Coalescence, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you until we win, and we will. Because when you get organized, you win.
So before we take a quick, shorter break than we had planned, and hear from our friend Kathy Hurwitz as the Rockefeller lecturer, I wanted to bring up another friend and a previous Rockefeller lecturer, a consumer advocate who has done more than almost anyone in the country to expose wrongdoing of corporate health insurance, and someone who's been integral to the Coalescence that Alex talked about. And we'll speak a little bit about Adi and his ongoing legacy. Wendell Potter.
David, thank you so much, and thanks for allowing me to do this. I echo what Alex said, but it would take Adi Barkan, and well, first of all, there are many of us who have been working over years to try to improve and expand the traditional Medicare program. And we've been sounding the alarm about Medicare Advantage for a long time, but it would take Adi to bring us together. In his wheelchair, without his voice. It was just a remarkable thing to be a part of that, to be in his presence. He did coalesce us. He brought us together to develop a strategy and to have a presence on Capitol Hill and in the media. It was a privilege to get to know him. I think we felt that we would always have him. We knew he was had this awful disease, but up until the very end, he was a part of our Zoom calls. He was an active participant. I first met Audie several years ago during the time that there was a lot of support, and he was in the news to advocate for Medicare for all. He, during that time, gave absolutely the most compelling testimony I have ever seen. I was a reporter in this town a long time ago. I used to be a newspaper reporter. I covered Capitol Hill. I covered a lot of hearings. I have never seen more compelling testimony, more riveting testimony, more impactful testimony than the testimony he gave in 2019 at the first ever hearing on Medicare for all. It's shameful that it was the first hearing that this Congress had ever had on that, despite years of growing support for that. I had the privilege of attending the premiere of the documentary. I think some of that video was from the documentary about Audie's life not going quietly in Los Angeles. Audie certainly was determined not to go quietly, and he absolutely did not. And he hasn't gone. He is still with us, and he is still guiding us and inspiring us to move this work forward. The last time that I know of that he testified before Congress, he did it from his bed remotely. It was in 2022, just a couple of years ago. It was in March. He was testifying before the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. And I came across this from his testimony that I thought was very relevant to the work that I do and that we all need to do. He said, "We've allowed greedy corporations to set the parameters of what we can expect of our healthcare system. And because of it, we've been forced to normalize the fate of bankruptcy, illness, and disease. It's shameful that in the richest country in the world, we choose to inflict so much suffering." I wish I could be that eloquent and that direct. He didn't mince words. He knew that time was short for him and for all of us. So thank you for this opportunity to honor and pay tribute to Audie Barkan, our real hero. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendell. Much appreciated. So now we're going to go to a much shorter break.
We have a lot of nice goodies out there, Scott reminds me, and a wonderful, much more wonderful moments together to come with Kathy Hurwitz as our Rockefeller lecturer. So please have a short break and come on back in about 5-10 minutes, please. Okay, let's get going with our Senator J. Rockefeller lecture, please. And I'll ask Kathy Hurwitz and Judy Fetter to come to the stage. And please, everyone, come in and join us for this important, really honor to the center and for Kathy and for the former Rockefeller lecturer who we have right here, Judy Fetter, who also, I understand at one point, the two of you, Senator Rockefeller and you tried to keep the Senate working. So thank you for your efforts in that regard. We want to thank the John A. Hartford Foundation for many things, including support for the Center for Medicare Advocacy and for sponsoring this Senator John D. Rockefeller lecture. Let me start that over. Senator, I don't think you're watching, but I know your name as you would tell me. What would he say, Shelley? He would say, "My name is Jay," if I said to him, Senator. I also want to thank Shelley Rogers for being here. Please stand, Shelley. The senator is not up to being here today, but for the last 10 years since I've had the honor of becoming friends with Jay Rockefeller, I've become friends with Shelley Rogers, who keeps track, she says, of the dogs, the household, the man of the house, the woman of the house, and his social calendar and work calendar. And Shelley, you are really incredible and have become a dear friend. And I very, very much appreciate your being here today to represent Senator Rockefeller. This is very meaningful to us. Thank you. Please send him our regards. I hope you all know what a force for justice Senator J. Rockefeller is and was on behalf of advancing access to quality health care and equity for all. Not everyone coming from the kind of position he comes from does what he does with his life and with his efforts on behalf of all human beings. So we're very, very grateful to him. Thank you. So we are really honored today to have both Wendell Potter, a former Rockefeller lecturer, and Judy Fader, a former lecturer, with us, and to be able to have Kathy Hurwitz speak as the 2024 Senator J. Rockefeller lecturer. There are many reasons we were so enthused when we thought about inviting Kathy to give this lecture, and Kathy really was oh yeah, that's exactly right. Truly. I'm going to tell you, Kathy has really, if you'll read her bio, a long and important history and current work on behalf of social justice. What we remember most is her 20 years serving as chief of staff to wonderful progressive representative Jan Schakowsky from Illinois. I know her as a longtime ally of Representative Toby Moffett from my dear state of Connecticut. She was responsible for work regarding universal health care, senior and labor issues, and she currently serves, no moss grows under Kathy Hurwitz, as senior advisor to Lower Drug Prices Now, a member of the Center for Medicare Advocacy's advisory board as well, I'm proud to say, and we thank you for your efforts on our behalf. And she is the treasurer of the Democratic National Committee Seniors Council. But one thing I think must be said before I ask you to speak, Kathy, is the most remarkable thing in your years as chief of staff for Representative Schakowsky was your constantly being willing to meet with us. And as Afton said earlier, in-person relationships, what can we do for you? What do you need? Is so important. And Kathy always wanted to learn from us and then to tell us why you might want to alter that approach or think about it a slightly different way, because this is how my member or the others are thinking about it. But we would be at the Hill for any number of reasons, and David would often say to me, let's see if Kathy's available. And Kathy was almost available, always available. And if she only had a little bit of time, or she had something she really wanted us to focus on, she made that clear. I learned so much from you. And your open door was a gift that I'm not sure you know how much we advocates for those who need a voice are grateful for. So, Kathy Hurwitz.
That was a very overly generous introduction, but thank you. I miss those days on the Hill since I retired, but let me start by saying what an honor it is to give this talk. This is a talk. I had the privilege of lobbying Senator Rockefeller during the Clinton healthcare days. And I wished that there had been more senators and members of the House like Senator Rockefeller, because we would have won a huge victory and we would probably not have to be here because we would have solved healthcare problems. I don't know, I can count one other senator who I think had the compassion and the caring and the commitment to solving healthcare problems. And that was Ted Kennedy. I mean, the two of them together, when we would go to talk to them, we felt as if we were home. Then when Claude Pepper died, and we were devastated because we didn't know who could step forward to work on health care and long-term care, Senator Rockefeller came forward. And he did a smashing job, including hiring Judy Fader to do the Pepper Commission, which is great. But Senator Rockefeller, I hope that you can convey to him, Shelley, the real joy that I had in working with him.
He is watching.
Oh, good. Oh, well, thank you, Senator Rockefeller. Now, speaking of home, I have to say, people earlier in the day talked about this place. It's great we're coming back to KFF. It's great. I started in Washington working on energy policy. In 1985, I was switching over to healthcare. My very first tutorial on healthcare took place on this site. Not this building, because it wasn't here, but Judy Waxman, who worked for the Villers Foundation, sat me down and talked to me about Medicaid, and her partner, Judy Paris, talked to me about Medicare. And I sat in 1334 G Street, and I got the initial discussion. And I, not knowing, having done energy work where I could talk about nuclear or coal or solar or whatever, I made the mistake of asking Judy Waxman about Medicare policy. She goes, oh, no, I don't do Medicare. I don't know anything about Medicare. And the same thing with Judy Paris. And I came out of that meeting thinking, well, now I think three things, and that is, it's helpful to be named Judy when you're doing healthcare policy, or to know Judys when you're doing healthcare policy. But two, first, I learned that healthcare is really complicated, and that, right? And that, two, I better find people to be my experts. I have been very, very fortunate in the nearly 40 years that I've been working on healthcare to find experts who are willing to answer my stupid questions, help me out, help me understand everything. Judy Stein is at the top of that list. She has been absolutely amazing. And the team that she has put together, Toby Edelman working on long-term care, David Lipschitz, I could name everybody. We could not have done their job on the Hill without them. And so I really, really want to thank you for helping me look good. Okay, thank you. But when I came to work on healthcare, I actually had kind of a construct of how I approached issues. And for that, I want to move from G Street to Guatemala. And I'm going to tell you a story which is going to explain how I think about issues that need solutions. In 1979, I went to visit a friend of mine in Guatemala. She was living in a very rural area, very dangerous. It was controlled by the military. And we were living in this little island in Lake Atitlan. But sometimes we had to leave the island in her pickup truck and go somewhere. It was not easy. And so the first thing we had to figure out is where we needed to go and how we were going to get there. You couldn't just take the main road all the time. Sometimes you had to do a lot of detours, and it wasn't easy. The second thing is we had to think about the obstacles in our way. And there were obstacles like big chunks of the road missing, trees in the road, and for me, a little scarier than that, military barricades with people pointing guns at us. We did it by having a team. My friend would drive the pickup truck, And she would look directly in front of the truck to make sure that we weren't going to go off the road because we had hit a ditch. My job was to look at the horizon and to look for military barricades and problems down the road. So whenever I come to an issue, that's the way I think about it. It's where do we want to go? How do we get there? What are the obstacles in the way? And then how do we get around those obstacles? What is the team that we need to put together in order to get around the obstacles? And I will tell you that the fight we're having now, we're going to need more than 2 people. So everybody in the room needs to step up. So where are we going? I mean, we know that the fight that we're having now, we want universal, quality, affordable health care. Medicare is one of the places that we get that. And we certainly want to protect Medicare. But Peter Morley said something which I think was interesting. He talked about not just affordable, he talked about accessible. And when we think about accessible, I think we need to think about that as one of the component pieces of what we are going to work on. And that's broad. That's like, how do we deal with getting healthcare services to people in rural areas? How do we build the workforce we're going to need? So if you need a home care worker, you need a CNA in a nursing home, you need a primary care doc or an OBGYN, they're there for you. How do we make sure that when somebody with a disability goes into a doctor's office, the equipment is there so that they can be weighed and treated and get on the table for people to see? We need to be thinking about accessibility. And of course, with Medicare, you've heard this all day long today, we need to make sure that we protect traditional Medicare and that we confront the rise, not just of Medicare Advantage, but of corporate health care that is seeping throughout the country, whether it's private equity or third-party subcontractors. We need to do that, and we need to do that together. We also need to add benefits to Medicare. You've heard about dental, vision, and hearing. I am so grateful to the Center for Medicare Advocacy for the work they're doing on home health and making sure people know what's there for them now if they know their rights and they have people fighting for them. But we also need a long-term care policy in this country. It is atrocious what is happening to people in this country. So those are kind of the things that I think, in my view, we need. That's where we want to go. It's not a straight line. We're not going to go from here to there tomorrow. We may have to do a few things along the way to get there, but that's where we need to go. And I'm going to add just one more thing as we think about how to get there. We need to make it simple. And you've heard that over and over and over again today. I just spent, I thought it was going to take me 45 minutes to explain to my sister-in-law and her partner last Friday their choices on Medicare, traditional versus Medicare Advantage. I was wrong. Okay, so after 2.5 hours, they were still Part D, Medicare, what is it? How does all this work together? We have to make it simpler. So whatever we do, please, let's do that. Okay, so what are the obstacles in our way? Well, as a former House person, congressional staffer, I would say the biggest obstacle we have is that we don't have enough Lloyd Doggett's and Jan Schakowsky's and Senator Rockefeller's who are serving in Congress. We just don't. We need to get people there who share our vision. You heard Adi talk about it. You heard you've heard a lot of people today talk about that. We need to do that. And it's not just a question of legislation. It's a question of enforcement, and it's a question of regulation. when the home care workers got FLSA protection, that was because the Obama administration issued a regulation. If we get, depending on what happens in November, the nursing home regulations that we got, as much as we want to build on them, they could go away. So we need to think about this in a lot of different things. So that's one thing. So how do we get a Congress or a state legislature that we want? Well, one, we have to confront the power of special interests. You heard Afton talked about that earlier. Campaign contributions, the army of lobbyists that they've got. You know, it used to be something like there were 250 insurance company lobbyists for every member of Congress. I mean, it's very, very hard up there. So how do we do that? I would say this is what I always used to say, is that people power, e.g. votes, trump campaign contributions and corporate lobbyists. That if you know that you're going to lose an election, if you don't do the correct thing, you say to those guys, sorry, I'm going to take your money, but I can't vote with you. And so that's what we need to do. Now, how do we do that? I think, and Alex Lawson talked about it, we cannot silo ourselves and work on different fights. We all need to work together. We need to build the coalitions, and I will use that word because I'm an old activist. I believe in coalitions. We need to build the coalitions that are strong and powerful, and I will say deep. They have to be based not in Washington, D.C., but based in the communities in which these members of Congress come and where we all live. And so we have to work on that. I'm so excited to see this summit because we're talking about issues on Medicare involving people with disabilities and seniors together. You may think that's like, duh, why wouldn't you? When I first started working on healthcare in Congress, I would say maybe 1 in 20 members knew that people with disabilities were even on Medicare. My boss, Jan Schakowsky, used to say, you know, she would never talk about Medicare as a seniors program. It was always a seniors program and a program for people with disabilities. When we would have our anniversaries, and we've got the anniversary of Medicare coming up in July, we all have to plan for that, we would always bring somebody in from the disability community and not just seniors. So we need to do that. But we need to do bigger than that. I'm not saying that we all have to become expert in veterans' health or in Medicaid or in our employer and ERISA plans. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying we need to work with people who are expert in those programs. We need to build the trust so that we can all help each other out. When we had the nursing home regs, I work with a group called Healthcare for America Now, and they have a lot of state-based organizations. They don't typically work on Medicare. They love it, they like it, they're going to fight to make sure it stays, but they don't know anything about Medicare policy or long-term care policy. But when the proposed regs came out, we were able to go to them, give them some briefings, give them some materials, and they got thousands of comments in supporting not just doing something on staffing, but doing stronger things on staffing. That's the type of coalition we have. And as Afton said, members of Congress who are on your side, who share the vision about where we need to go, they need to be part of the team, like sitting and strategizing together. So we need the team. The other thing I was going to just mention about having people across different programs, a number of the problems we're facing now with Medicare are not just limited to Medicare. The rise of private equity, the issue of employers putting their workers in managed care plans, those are problems that are not Medicare specific, but they're healthcare specific, and we need to work together. There's another obstacle that I just want to raise, and that is the public. We tend not to think about John Q. Public, the people who live normal lives and are not connected to organizations and don't pay attention to healthcare policy. They don't read that Medicare handbook, and they don't do that, right? And many of their interactions with the healthcare system are not, they're not that constant, right? Yet. But they have some views that we need to deal with. First of all, no information. And Tricia Newman talked about that this morning. Like, nobody knows what's in the IRA. Nobody knows where the $35, if they know that there's a $35 limit on copays, they don't know who brought it to them or where it is. There is disinformation, and Afton, I think, can back me up here. The number of people who call us up and say things like in Obamacare, undocumented immigrants are covered by Obamacare. You cannot, I think they should be, but you cannot convince people that it's not true. We have to figure out how to deal with disinformation. And then there's misinformation. And one of the things that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, how do we get people to get a restored faith in government? We think about the traditional Medicare as being great because it's publicly accountable. But a lot of people think, oh, a private plan is going to be more efficient and better for me. The private plans are better, private sector is better, government's bad. How do we get over that? And I think that's a hurdle. So one of the things that I think is we work more coalitionally. We work with labor, community groups, patients groups, disability groups, senior groups, good government groups. But we also have to figure out people within their communities. And the thing that I've been noodling about for the last, I don't know, several months, I was privileged to know Paul Farmer, who was one of the people who started the community health worker movement. And when it started, people were like, oh, no, you can't send people from the community into their communities to do healthcare work. We all now know it works, that people trust the community healthcare workers, and it works. I believe we need to train people to be community health advocates in their communities so that they can respond to misinformation, disinformation, and provide the information. And we also need those advocates to be able to say, when somebody tells you, as I think Tricia Newman said, they want to protect Medicare and they really don't, we need someone who is trusted in the community to blow the whistle to them. I know it sounds like a lot, like it sounds maybe hard to do, but the good news is we just had a victory doing it. The prescription drug reforms that we made, when we started 2 years ago, nobody thought we were going to do it. What we did is we worked across many coalitions. We were deep, we were broad. We also had, we were going up against pharma, which is a pretty, scary opponent. But what we had was the public wanted lower drug costs, so we knew that. We had to get the solutions in. And we had to get the members of Congress to have the political will to say to pharma, we're not following you. We're going to follow the right path, the right vision to lower drug prices. And one of the things that happened, members of Congress in swing districts, Abigail Spanberger from Virginia, Susan Wild from Pennsylvania, Jared Golden from Maine, others, went to their leadership and they said, our people are demanding lower drug prices. we cannot win our races unless you do it. And I think that's the major reason why we were able to get this done. We got it put in the bill, and we got it done. So I think that it may seem daunting, but it's very, very doable if we put the powerful coalitions together, mobilize the public, because after all, our vision is the vision that is shared by 90% of the American public. We know the path, we know the team we know, and we can overcome the obstacles. So I'm very excited about continuing to do this work and making sure that traditional Medicare is there, not just for me as a Medicare beneficiary right now, but for my nieces and nephews and future generations. So thank you. I got it. Okay.
Kathy, I do have an award that I'd like to provide you with, and it says, the Senator J. Rockefeller Lecturer 2024 is presented to Kathy Hurwitz. And Ms. Hurwitz's influence in the legislature and healthcare policy in general has been profound, as has her impact on myriad issues moving health and social justice forward in favor of the well-being of people in need and a just society.
I hope that's what you wanted.
And I also have a new book called What Do You Do with a Voice Like That, about Barbara Jordan.
Excellent.
I hope you'll enjoy. Thank you so much. Listen, another thank you for And I'm so glad to know through Shelley that Senator Rockefeller, you may have been able to hear this and hear our great gratitude to you for your extraordinary work on behalf of health equity and social justice. And thank you for coming, Shelley. And so now I'd like to ask David Lipschitz and Scott Perkins to come forward. And do that now? Yeah. Okay. And we're going to show one more video. This is from one of our wonderful funders that you all in DC don't know that much about probably. But it's a family foundation, which are really gems. The Jeffrey P. Austin Family Foundation is a foundation in Eastern Connecticut, which you see a few heads nodding. Eastern Connecticut's they call it the quiet corner of Connecticut, but I live there. And we make a lot of good trouble in Eastern Connecticut. And the Austin Foundation funds the Center for what we call our Act Locally, Think Globally project. And I'd like to show the Austin Foundation video now, if I could.
I hope you are all enjoying the 11th Annual National Voices of Medicare Summit. I am Jacqueline Berkowitz, and I'm representing the Jeffrey P. Austin Family Foundation. It is a privilege to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the Center for Medicare Advocacy for their invaluable efforts on behalf of Medicare beneficiaries in Connecticut and across the nation. The Jeffrey P. Austin Family Foundation, rooted in Mansfield like CMA, is dedicated to supporting opportunities for individuals by investing in 4 priority areas: housing, food, physical and emotional well-being, and education. We look to empower change for a more equitable, just, and healthy society. The foundation has been a proud supporter of the center for over a decade. The center's work has reached far beyond their little corner of Connecticut. The center's work to ensure that Medicare beneficiaries receive accurate and balanced information by hosting town halls with congressional leaders, developing materials to be shared and distributed, working to appeal Medicare denials, assisting Connecticut residents to obtain coverage, providing testimony to lawmakers, has been instrumental in making strides towards systemic change at both the state and national level. Like some of the other center's supporters, the foundation is committed to supporting the center through general operating support. We view this opportunity to allow the center to do what they do best: advocate for the protection, preservation, and enhancement of Medicare for older people and people with disabilities. Thus, we strongly encourage you to join us in continuing to financially support the center. A sincere thank you to the center's entire team for their unwavering dedication to expanding access to comprehensive Medicare coverage and champion health equity and quality health care for older adults and individuals with disabilities. Thank you.
That's so lovely, and it's really indicative of the expanse of the work we do. Looking at much of my team from Connecticut here, Kathy and Susan, and I can't see everyone who's in the room, Aisha, Steph, Terry. We do things in Eastern Connecticut for the Austin Family Foundation, like Medicare bingo at the senior center, and teach in that way to folks about Medicare in a way that is fun and instructive. And we also have really expanded the work that the Federally Qualified Health Center does in our area, and recognize what they recognize about people under 65 who may qualify for Medicare, as Kathy was just mentioning, and have moved to out of silos of 12 community service organizations into an advisory team, so that we now work together, know what's happening in the community, from the area interfaith ministry to the Qualified Health Center to the congressional delegation to the Area Agency on Aging, maximizing our reach and our work throughout Eastern Connecticut. It's a model we're very proud of. We like to act locally and think globally. And one of the things that has come out of some of that, and the direct service that Kathy leads and talked about earlier with Allie, is also some of our clients coming from Connecticut to testify about the inequities of Medicare Advantage at a hearing before the Senate Homeland Security Committee with Senator Blumenthal earlier this year. So we're talking, closing today in our theme of pathways to change. And actually, I really am not good at change. I really am a nester. I like keeping good people around me. I like to stay in my community. I like being nurtured and being a nurturer. And as a consequence, I'm working hard to nurture the Center for Medicare Advocacy. I think that's what a leader does. And this is not a swan song. I am not going anywhere. Well, maybe I'll... Ken, maybe my husband, you want to say hello? Say hello. I'm hoping we'll get to the beach again. But I am going to be stepping back in July from my role as executive director. I get to keep the title founder, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm happy to say that we will be enhancing the opportunities for growth and leadership within the Center for Medicare Advocacy in a wide variety of ways. A lead one is that my dear friend and co-director and operations director, Scott Perkins, will become co-director. Our esteemed senior policy attorney will become co-director. Scott will handle operations and management and development and making sure there's matzah on the catering table. David will be responsible for legal matters, continuing to shepherd our public voice with regard to the media and set our policy agenda. Together they have an extraordinary match of skills. They like each other, which is really good, really good. And we will also be elevating Kathy Holt to Deputy Director and leading our Connecticut endeavors, which is foundational and always has been to our work, as I just mentioned. There's nothing that the center could do if it weren't for the foundation and the heart and the soul that comes to our work from the individual advocacy and the community of people who come to us for help. About 50, 60%, Susan would know, from Connecticut, and the other 40% from around the country. I'd like to ask everyone from the center to stand now. I know you're probably a majority of who's left, but all my staff, please. Thank you. None of this, we punch above our weight, and there's people back doing the work so that we could be here today. I want to thank you all. Weiwei is responsible for a lot of that oral health work that you know has been advanced. He's a partner in crime with Allie, who grow on the shoulders of Gilda Ford. Kata is going to be helping out in some of the policy leadership as David takes on more of the face of the center and other. I don't know what else. What else are you going to do? I figured something might be happening back there. We have two attorneys back in the Connecticut office who will be having some enlarged supervisory role, and as I say, Kathy Holt will become Deputy Director, and we'll be expanding our opportunities to make sure that we are out in the field again and networking again. There's some wonderful folks here from Connecticut, and we were mentioning we just don't see each other anymore, and we've got to do that in order to build the next generation, to build the Katherine Johnsons who will be helped and will help others. And I also want to thank those members of our board who are here. I see Julie Evans-Starr, if you would stand, our Vice President, Sean Kavanaugh, thank you, Marion Platt, the first president of the Center for Medicare Advocacy. That was when we were 15, Marianne, right? 40 years ago. Liz Duckrow. Judy Fader. Am I forgetting anyone? And Regina Bly. And Kathy Hurwitz is on our advisory board. So, I don't know if you guys need to say anything.
We will make sure she gets to the beach, Ken.
Next year. They can say stuff next year.
Thank you. And I do have one little bit of poetry to send us off with. I still believe, and I hope many of you do, what lessons I've first and early on learned. That the meaning and possibility of politics and about its proper form is first that whenever you live, there's injustice, and that there is a better time and a better world, and that there is a promised time of less justice and more social justice for all. And finally, that the way to that land is through the wilderness. And there's no way to get from here to a time of more justice except by joining together and marching. So let's march on. Thank you very, very much.